forward now and say we are ready to welcome back a lot of the world, if you're including the UK and the US, then that is good news all around.
Aviation analyst Alex Machera says it's the most positive sign yet that long-haul designations in Asia may soon be accessible again to millions of holiday and business travellers.
We're talking about a continent that is still today pretty much off limits to the rest of the world. But what we've seen slowly is a few countries almost brave it with their policies. Singapore said that they accept that they will have to live with COVID rather than chase that zero COVID strategy. Now, just a few days later, the Thai Prime Minister, in a televised address, saying to them ultimately that they will allow fully vaccinated visitors.
For Thailand alone, the numbers are extraordinary. 40 million people visited the country in 2019, generating $60 billion in revenue. In the first 8 months of this year, there were just 74,000 tourist arrivals. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. The UK has called on the European Union to negotiate a new Northern Ireland protocol to ease post-Brexit tensions. And a US Navy nuclear engineer and his wife, charged for trying to sell nuclear submarine secrets to a foreign country, could face life in prison. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
Researchers at Princeton University's Department of Sociology have made a major leap in our understanding of social interaction.
We conducted trials in 90 supermarkets across the country and found that essentially 100% of people disapproved of having a stranger hit them across the face and then expose their genitalia right in the middle of the supermarket, which we found very interesting.
Researchers observed similar reactions when the subject hurled shopping carts toward unsuspecting shoppers, stood in the deli section rubbing cold cuts against his chest, or got right near cashier's ears and began loudly singing Yankee Doodle.
In this particular trial, we had our subject, Kevin, take off his shirt, tape a banana to his forehead, and charge at various shoppers like he was a rhino. Within 20 minutes, store owners called the police and he was arrested, allowing us to come to the conclusion that this type of behavior is still considered at least somewhat taboo.
This is the Onion News Network. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You're welcome to join us, 603-283-6160. That's the call-in line for you to do that, 603-283-6160. And with you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And, you know, since I was a little kid, I liked Dave Chappelle. Maybe not a little kid. I don't remember exactly how old I was when the Chappelle show first came on, but from the...
It's like almost 20 years ago, right? Something like that?
Okay.
Close to it?
I was young then, but not a little kid. But I always found it hilarious. I mean, there was very little about the show that I didn't think was funny. And then there was the Clayton Bigsby thing where he was the
crack smoker?
No.
Oh, wait, no, that was the KKK black guy.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And that was the moment that really sold me on Dave Chappelle just being absolutely hilarious and creative. Yeah. And I've always liked the guy. Then he got kind of weird. He did a Michael Jackson thing and like went off to North Africa for a number of years. And then he came back and he started doing comedy again. And he upset a lot of people with his last special, what was it called? Sticks and Stones, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway,
it was funny. I watched that one.
I watched it as well. And a lot of trans people, the LGBTQ community in general, was really upset by it. And I never understood what made them so upset. The only part of it I remember him saying anything about trans people was, you got to think about it, that's kind of funny, being a man born in a woman's body. And it is kind of funny, right? It's funny to think about how nature screws up so catastrophically sometimes. Cats born with 6 toes, all manner of weird things. Nature isn't perfect and weird stuff happens. That is kind of funny. But a lot of people got upset and, you know, cancel culture tried to do its thing apparently. Then he came back out with this one called The Closer, which is his latest special.
And you hadn't even heard about it, by the way, until I mentioned it to you last night, I think, right?
Right.
Like you didn't even know about it.
No. And I was able to watch it. And I still, I get why some people are upset, but it's not because of anything Dave Chappelle said.
Well, some people just don't have a sense of humor.
It is that there is part of that going on.
And they're constantly looking to be offended.
But I think it's just that they're not intelligent enough to understand what Dave Chappelle was actually saying.
That could be.
There was the lengthy bit he did about feminism and how they needed a man to be in charge. And he would lead them into success, and all they had to do were some sexual favors for him. And then he said, and then we're right back to square one, pointing out that's how this entire feminist movement became necessary in the first place, was because of exactly that mentality among men. And almost no one got that. They're just upset. They see, oh, he's taking shots at feminists. Like, no, he's actually not. He just made it seem that way while he was backing up the whole point that caused the rise of the feminist movement in the first place. And that just went over their heads. Just like all of the compassion that he put forward toward trans people. I mean, he even said at least once, just have empathy for people at all times. He said something to that effect.
Yeah, just talking about just being a human.
Yeah. And people found a way to be upset because he did make a lot of trans jokes, but...
And they were funny.
They were funny. I laughed a lot throughout this thing.
Yeah,
but
the whole thing was great.
One of my favorite lines was his criticism of LGBTQ people as being, you're a minority until you need to be white again. Talking about calling the police and stuff like that. And he makes an extremely valid point. And that's sort of one of my issues with the LGBTQ community. He just put it very succinctly in that one little line. But I didn't see anything to be upset about. He told a lengthy story about a trans friend of his who ultimately committed suicide.
It's a really sad story, actually.
Yeah, and he didn't say it was because of cancel culture, but, I've sort of been in that place, and not nearly on that scale, where I criticized the liberal redneck and all of his the liberal redneck.
I don't know.
He's just some guy on YouTube. Yeah, he's kind of funny.
Okay.
But he is a liberal, and he's a hardcore leftist,
Gotcha.
and he's a redneck, so he's got a decent following, and I criticized him for assuming that this Christian woman was racist simply because she was a white Christian woman. And
that's not fair.
No, and his followers just flocked my YouTube channel, and I just received hundreds of hateful comments.
Wow.
Most of them telling me things like, shut up, he's speaking up for you. What's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm speaking up for me,
Yeah, you
though.
didn't ask him to speak for you.
No.
You don't need someone to speak for you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But after dealing with that, I can see how dealing with it on a magnitude of, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of these people coming at you could cause someone to commit suicide. I just completely deleted the video that I made and just ignored the comments over the next week or so because it was toxic and it wasn't doing anything for my mental health. So I wouldn't be surprised if that crowd actually did cause her to kill herself, but he even admitted that he didn't know what was going on in her life at the time.
Sure.
He described her as a friend, he characterized her as a friend, but the description that he provided was more of he knew of her and he had hung out with her on a few occasions, but not someone that he regularly hung out with.
Well, yeah, I mean, he travels a lot, so.
Yeah, good point. But a lot of people got really...
They were close enough to where he had invited her to do an opening act for him.
Yes.
And then proceeded to invite her to do more work with him.
Yes, but the opening act that she did initially apparently was terrible. Which isn't too surprising, but that she ended up being backstage with him, and when they were just hanging out, it seems that from his description, she was a comedian who did a better back and forth than she did just standing there talking.
Well, she was also newish as well, as he explained. It was a really interesting and really sad story. I didn't expect it. That took me by surprise in the because it's a comedy show. You generally don't want to bring your audience down, but it was appropriate, and I thought it was well placed.
A lot of people are saying now that, he was just using, quote, his trans friend as sort of a shield, that whole, I can't be racist, I have a black friend
trans,
thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying he did that kind of thing, but if you watch his body language as he tells that final joke about her and about how, it was the manliest thing she had ever done or something to that effect, you could see the pain in his face as he made that joke and how, he was making it specifically to be edgy. But you could hear the pain in his voice and see it in his face as he said that. So I have no doubt that this was an actual friend of his. Yeah. And I've never seen anything from him that suggested he was transphobic or homophobic or anything like that. A lot of people...
Oh, but he said he was transphobic during this, though, so it must be true.
He did.
I mean, some people just take what he says at face value, and it's clear that he's not being serious with a lot of the things that come out of his mouth.
One of the first jokes he made was about Martin Luther King using a glory hole. If you open with that, why would you take anything said in the next hour even remotely seriously?
I don't know. Like I said, there's a certain group of people out there that just loves to be offended, and that's what they're looking for. And they want to make a statement about something that offends them. So everybody knows how, woke they are or whatever.
Yeah, so a friend of mine sent me an article about these trans comedians who are explaining why this is transphobic and messed up. So I looked through it. That wasn't at all what they were doing. It's just a bunch of trans comedians expressing outrage. Well, that's not an argument.
Were they being funny?
No. They're like, I'm breaking character here. I'm going to stop being funny for a minute to talk about why I'm so upset about this. But saying that you're upset doesn't explain to me why I'm supposed to be upset, first of all. And I don't need you to explain to me why I should be upset. I'm not upset by what I saw, and you expressing outrage isn't going to make me upset about what I saw because I know what I saw.
Sounds to me like the trans comedians are hoping to ride some coattails, right? Okay, well, let's be upset about Dave Chappelle. Hashtag Dave Chappelle, to try to get people to pay attention to them. Maybe they'll get some extra followers, and, they're pandering to, again, the offended crowd, which, it's tough to be a comedian these days.
It is, because
so much sensitive out there.
And the whole point of comedians has always been to push the boundaries.
Yeah, and usually comedy, whether you like it or not, and if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it, but usually comedy has a victim. There's usually somebody who is sort of the victim of the butt of a joke.
I would say the butt of the joke. Yeah. But I don't think trans people were the butt of the closer. I think it was cancel culture and outrage culture. As a trans person, I wasn't in the least offended by any of it. In fact, it just made me sad that he's not going to continue doing these, because he said in there, this is my last one for a while. I'm like, well, that kind of sucks. I forgot how funny you were, and I want you to do another one.
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, if you got a good product and you put it out there too much, then it can burn on somebody, right? It can burn you out, right? That's why he ended up walking away from Chappelle's show, was because, it just wasn't worth doing for him anymore. He was burned out and didn't want to deal with the corporate BS and all that, and he could afford to walk away, and it made people want him back, right? You don't know what you got till it's gone.
What do you think? Should people be offended by Dave Chappelle? Should I be offended? Give me a call. Let me know why I should be upset. 603-283-6160.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it.
Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Breaking weather news. Belize is sunny and around 82 degrees every day this week.
What's the forecast for your life? If current politics and economic prospects are cramping your freedom, escape to the tropics. ECI Development has affordable second homes for you to own or rent in Belize and other tropical countries. Places with stable governments and growing economies. Secure your freedom now. To find out more, send an email to ftl@ecidevelopment.com.
After a devastating war, the alien visitors were driven back, and their willing human collaborators were left behind to face the music. When Emma Jean Anderson's ex-lover brings her from prison, Nathan Foster and his 14-year-old nephew Ben are tasked with bringing the pair to justice. An easy enough job until they discover something is inside Emma Jean, and the fate of the planet hangs in the balance. The Family Business by Mike Coopery from BaneBooks.com.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
The LRN.FM social media channels have been revamped. We've eliminated Facebook and focused on other platforms like Twitter and Mastodon, the decentralized alternative to Twitter. On our accounts, you'll find posts from multiple LRN.FM show hosts together in one place. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.lrn.fm, or better yet, move to the decentralized Mastodon social media platform at toot.lrn.fm, toot.lrn.fm. I think you'll like it.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You're invited to join us, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And I want to tell you about Liberty in Our Lifetime. You can get your digital tickets now. Unfortunately, physical tickets are sold out. It's being hosted by the Free Private City Foundation. LifetimeLiberty.com is the website. They're exploring projects happening right now around the world that are working to achieve the lofty goal of liberty in our lifetime. Speakers from Crypto Valley, Prospera, the Seasteading Institute, and more are going to be speaking at the October 16th event. So get your digital tickets now for only $50 at LifetimeLiberty.com and see what people are doing to create a free world at LifetimeLiberty.com. We have Dave Ridley calling from the Ridley Report. Dave, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, folks.
Hey, what's on your mind tonight?
From New Hampshire here with an update on New Hampshire independence.
Hey, what's going on, Dave? I'm sorry I missed the meeting today. It was my first one that I've missed in 10 weeks.
Yeah, so the news I got from the meeting today was that I guess they hit 9. It was 9 legislators that ultimately signed on as sponsors and co-sponsors of the New Hampshire Independence Amendment.
That is awesome.
And for our listeners that are new maybe to this topic, there's a state representative, Mike Sylvia, who's a liberty-loving, award-winning, freedom-loving rep. He's like one of the top freedom reps out there. He has introduced a constitutional amendment that, if passed by the State House and the Senate with over 60% in both House and Senate, will end up on the ballot in 2022, where it then must be passed by over 2/3 of voters, and it will then immediately go into effect, and we will declare peaceful independence from the United States at that point and proceed as an independent nation. That's a rough summary of what's going on. So what you're saying, Dave, is that Mike Sylvia has found a total of 9 people that... Now, does that include him, the 9?
Yes.
Okay, so 9 people, including him, will have their names. 9 state representatives, I should say, will have their names on this as co-sponsors. The maximum number of co-sponsors is 10.
Oh.
I would say that it is fairly unusual to see this many co-sponsors on a bill. This is a pretty big deal, I think.
There's also been some flamethrower talk from an anti-independence state rep, apparently, according to Alu Exelman from the Liberty Block, LibertyBlock.com. he says one of the state reps that he emailed, urging them to support the constitutional amendment, emailed him back saying, quote, "I have sworn an oath to defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies. I would absolutely support any federal effort to crush any state that attempts to dissolve the Union," unquote.
Do we know if this guy's a Republican, just out of curiosity, or a Democrat, or what?
No, I don't know what his affiliation is. And I emailed him, "Hey, did you really say this?" And he didn't get back to me. It's been about 4 days.
What was his name, this guy?
His name is J.C. Allard, according to Alu Axelman.
I would imagine the state rep would be a bit hesitant to admit that he actually did say this. But, I mean, the possibility of the state of New Hampshire declaring independence from the federal government and the federal government coming in with tanks and drones and bombs and flamethrowers, that's so unbelievably unlikely.
Well, apparently this guy is willing to pull out some guns and start shooting. At least that's the way he's making it sound. And by the way, he is a Republican from Merrimack, apparently.
You know, when you talk about using all, any federal effort, that that would include what? Torture, genocide?
Yeah, I guess so. That's usually what they do.
All the things they've already done, right?
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, the fact that they've done all those things does actually mean that they could do something violent. But yeah, with support running with as much concern about them as there already is, imagine how fast the states would all line up to eject from the Union if the federal government did use violence on any kind of wide scale against Americans.
Yeah, I just don't see it likely.
Yeah, it would look really bad for them. And Robert Murphy, who's a libertarian kind of voluntarist thinker guy, he came out with like a 46-page document about why Texas should leave the United States. And a lot of the rationales, similar to why New Hampshire should leave. And he addresses some of the objections that we always hear, and this is one of them. Federal government's going to drop bombs on you or whatever. It's like, well, wait a minute. Don't forget that there are.
So you're staying out of fear. You're staying in an abusive relationship because you're scared your husband will kill you if you leave?
There's that point, but then there's also the practical side of, really? You think they're going to go ahead and drop bombs on their supporters? Because remember, ain't going to be 100% of New Hampshire that's in favor of independence, okay? If this passes, if it gets through the House and the Senate, they decide, all right, let's let the people vote on this, because they should. They should let people vote on this. If it gets on the ballot and it goes with, 70%, that still means 30% of the voters were against it. So, roughly 1 out of 3 people dying in those firebombs or, whatever they drop on New Hampshire, in theory, would be their loyalists.
Loyal to the people dropping bombs on them.
Yeah. So it would not look good for them, and it just doesn't make sense that they would do something like that at all. And then, then there's the point that New Hampshire is also a well-armed place, and, they had a hard time in Afghanistan. So there is that. Not that I support violence.
And New Hampshire is just peacefully seceding is the idea.
It's in the actual statement of the bill. It's in the wording. It will be, the word peaceful is actually, if it is on the ballot, if it makes it to the ballot, it's going to be in there. So, yeah, this is not the South seceding violently by firing on some sort of fort. If there's somebody that's going to be violent, it's going to come from the federal government. But I agree with you, Aria. I don't think that is very likely at all.
Yeah, it's not the 19th century anymore. The United States government just wouldn't be able to get away with doing something that grotesque.
No, I mean, there's so many cameras around. There's so much accountability, instant accountability, streaming video online. They can't cover this up. It's not like it's going to take horseback to deliver the news to the rest of the country about the bombings or shootings or whatever it is the federal government decides to do in this case. So I think they're going to just let us go, just like Brexit was allowed to be let go from the European Union. They're just going to let us go.
The advantage we have in New Hampshire is that we don't have to draw it out. The constitutional amendment, if it passes, that very day, New Hampshire is independent.
Right. Now, obviously, there's things that need to get hashed out after the fact, like, what about the borders and what about trade and all of that. But we don't need to figure all that out in advance to just say, okay, it's over.
Yep.
Right? Like, if you're breaking up from a bad relationship, you just get your stuff and you walk out. And then you can figure out later who gets the car and who gets the dog and all that. And, if it's an amicable one, then you can take your time to figure those things out.
Yeah, but I wouldn't characterize this as amicable,
Well, that's true. We're not happy.
I mean, that's why we kind of want to leave. It is an abusive relationship, and we want out of it.
You do tend to get along, I think in a lot of cases, at least mature people will get along better after they break up, right?
Yes.
You're no longer living in the same house with this person, so you can get along with that person a little bit better. So if the federal government isn't, murdering and taxing us to death, then, maybe we can come to an agreement about letting people cross the borders or something. Who knows?
Dave, thank you so much for the... Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't be Pollyannish or overly optimistic about this is like surgery. We should treat it with fear to the same extent that everyone else does, because it is dangerous.
Dave, thank you so much for the call tonight. You were starting to break out there for a bit. I'm hopeful. I'm going to hope for the best because that's generally what I tend to do. 603-283-6160. What do you think about the possibility of New Hampshire seceding? 9 state reps have co-sponsored a bill that could make that happen. It's Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live's video archives have been on LBRY for years. LBRY is an uncensorable, decentralized, blockchain-based media sharing protocol, and we're big fans of it here on Free Talk Live. In 2020, LBRY launched Odyssey, a video sharing website to compete with YouTube, and it's really taking off. Now with over 1 million channels, many of whom are disaffected YouTube creators. During YouTube's crackdown for not towing the government line on COVID, the Free Talk Live YouTube channel started receiving strikes and could be completely taken down at any moment. Thankfully, Odyssey started offering live streaming, so we're now streaming live every night and posting our video archives permanently to Odyssey. You can watch live or anytime on our Odyssey channel by visiting video.freetalklive.com. If you want to go all in, download the desktop app at lbry.com, and then every video archive you watch, you'll help seed and keep it online forever. At minimum, we ask you visit video.freetalklive.com and follow us on Odyssey today. video.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. Meanwhile, IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva will remain in her position after a data rigging investigation cleared her of wrongdoing. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The IMF's latest World Economic Outlook predicts 5.9% growth this year, down slightly from the 6% projection that it issued in July. COVID-19 and supply chain disruption are the main factors slowing growth around the world. The IMF says it's a modest downgrade, but some developing countries are being hit much harder. Next year's projection from the IMF of 4.9% growth remains unchanged. Meanwhile, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva had been accused of pressuring staff to alter data to favour China. She denied the claims, and now an investigation has expressed full confidence in her, meaning she keeps her job.
The UK has called on the European Union to negotiate a new Northern Ireland protocol to ease post-Brexit tensions. The EU will set out its proposals on Wednesday. UK correspondent Ollie Barrett reports.
UK Brexit Minister Lord Frost says current arrangements for Northern Ireland are unsustainable.
The protocol is not working. It's completely lost consent in one community in Northern Ireland. It's not doing the thing it was set up to do. It has to change.
The protocol was agreed to govern trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of Britain, while also ensuring no hard border arose between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Lord Frost, speaking in Lisbon, said the way it's being implemented and its governance need to be amended. The European Commission will set out its proposals on Wednesday, but Lord Frost has effectively just rejected some of what Brussels is expected to suggest. The EU believes the UK should respect an agreement it signed. Lord Frost says the EU behaves as if it doesn't want the UK to succeed.
A US Navy nuclear engineer and his wife, charged for trying to sell nuclear submarine secrets to a foreign country, could face life in prison. Federal prosecutors say they're seeking continued detention for Jonathan and Diana Toby out of concern that they may try to flee the country. The couple, who have 2 children, allegedly tried to sell nuclear submarine design data. They were arrested on Saturday during what officials said was their latest dead drop of information to a person they thought was a foreign spy. In fact, it was an undercover FBI agent. The US Justice Department said they hid small data cards in everyday objects, including a peanut butter sandwich. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160. Kind of surprised for the lack of calls tonight, other than Dave Ridley. I mean, we're talking about Dave Chappelle, and people are always either upset with him or they're in love with him. There's like no middle ground with Dave Chappelle. You can't just, he's all right. You either hate him or you love him. And I fall on the side of loving him.
I like his comedy. I've enjoyed him. I'm not a fanatic or anything like that. I don't follow everything he does, but when I get the catch wind that there's a new special out, it's usually worth picking it up.
Yeah, because he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he offends people, but he offends everyone like South Park. That's what I don't get, right? His general thing is that he offends everyone equally all the time, just like South Park does. And the South Park creators aren't being accused of transphobia, so why is Dave Chappelle? He makes fun of everyone, but you pick this one particular group of people like, oh no, he's totally serious about this one. Everyone else, he's joking about hating.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I don't follow South Park closely as far as, so I don't know who they've been picking on recently, but clearly
everyone.
The wokeness is getting worse over time, it seems like, and the propensity for people to be offended seems to be getting worse over time. So, I mean, South Park may have their moment. I'm sure there have been episodes some people have badmouthed, in the past, but
I can't think of any. I'm sure you're correct. It's happened, but generally
maybe they didn't blow up to the level of Chappelle, and maybe part of it is because it's obviously fiction. When somebody's watching I'm just speculating here. If you're watching South Park, you're watching a fictional show, whereas some of these people, like I said earlier, they seem to believe that Dave Chappelle believes every word that comes out of his mouth.
But only when he talks about trans people. They know he's joking when he talks about, Martin Luther King and the stuff he said there that I don't really want to rehash.
Yeah.
But he said a lot of racist stuff, a lot of racist against black people stuff, a lot of sexist stuff. He does that.
Yeah. But there must be somebody out there who was offended by his line about the feminists, where he proposed that they put him in charge of the feminist movement.
I'm sure they were, but they completely missed the joke.
That's
if
what
they
I'm
were
saying.
offended.
These people miss these jokes. They are looking to be offended. They don't understand tongue-in-cheek. They don't understand subtlety.
No, that joke was way too subtle for most people. Yeah. I mean, that joke was brilliant, and it was lightning fast. That one little throwaway line.
It's not a new joke either. I mean, somebody's been cracking that online for years. It's just he delivered it, and so now he's going to get credit for it.
Well, I mean, the very last line where he said, and then we're right back to square one. That to me was the pinnacle of the joke.
Well, that was where it was clear for anyone who was really dense that he was just joking. That was where he made that clear.
I don't know how dense you have to be, because it was very quick, it was very subtle, and I don't think a lot of people would have even realized it had been said. That they walk away thinking, oh, he thinks a man should be in charge of the feminist movement. I'm like, you didn't listen to what he said, did you?
Yeah, no.
And I imagine a lot of these people who are offended didn't even watch it. I know people are canceling their Netflix subscriptions and putting Dave Chappelle. I was like, I'm not going to be upset about something until I've watched it all the way through to the end. Unless it's just so horrifically offensive that I can't finish it, which I don't think has ever happened.
Or I've heard you say you've aborted watching some pretty bad movies.
But not because I was offended, because they were just bad and not good. I mean, if Dave Chappelle hadn't been funny, I wouldn't have finished it.
Yeah.
But it was funny, so I continued watching it. And I'm glad I did. It was tremendously enjoyable. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
But other people are upset, and you have a story. I mean, Glad is upset for some reason. I mean,
what is that? Gay, lesbian, something.
I don't know what it stands for. It's something about LGBT stuff, though. Yeah. But they're called GLAAD, and for people who are called GLAAD, they sure are unhappy.
Yeah, they don't live up to their name. In response to this is from MSNBC and the Washington Post. In response to criticism that Dave Chappelle's new special is transphobic, Netflix's co-chief executive, in an internal memo, defended the comedian and said the streaming platform will not remove The Closer, which is the name of his recent special. The executive, named Ted Sarandos, cited creative freedom as one reason the company intends to keep the show online. Pressure to remove the special from Netflix has mounted both from inside and outside of the company over Chappelle's jokes about the transgender community. Sarandos wrote that although some people may find stand-up comedy to be mean-spirited, quote, our members enjoy it, and it's an important part of our content offering, unquote. He said further that Chappelle...
I didn't find it mean-spirited at all. I mean, he even routinely referred to trans people by the gender they prefer. I mean, if he had wanted to be transphobic, he could have referred to Daphne as he throughout the entire skit. And
that's true, he didn't.
He never did that.
I mean, he did crack about the pronouns on a couple of occasions, I think, but just joking about it.
Yeah.
Chappelle, said Sarandos, is one of the most popular stand-up comedians today, and we have a long-standing deal with him. His last special, Sticks and Stones, also controversial, is our most watched, stickiest, and most award-winning stand-up special to date, he said in the
I'm not surprised. It was really good.
So, look, they're making money off of this guy. Yeah. And, there may be some people who are canceling their subscriptions, but obviously Netflix is looking at the numbers, right? Because that's all they are. They're just a corporation. They're not in it for the artistic aspects. They're in this to make money. And if they were losing more customers than they were gaining over Dave Chappelle, you better believe they'd be like, you know what? We had a $100 million deal with this. I don't know, it's $400 million. Who knows how much they're paying him for this, right? We had X.
I saw a number that said $20 million per special.
Yeah, so we had a $100 million deal with this guy, and we're canceling him because our customers mean that much to us. Then it would be a whole different story if it were like, boom, they just lost 50% of their subscribers over this. But they didn't, obviously. And as this story points out, there's the Rotten Tomatoes website, which is a review site. And Rotten Tomatoes allows critics to review, and they have user reviews. So the critics' review is like 60% on the Dave Chappelle special, The Closer, and the user review is about 97% positive.
I'm suddenly very curious now. What is the cause of the disparity?
Well, critics. I mean, they're not the same as the audience, right? Like there's long been a divide between the critics doing movie reviews, like, oh, this is the greatest movie, and it's just some boring crap. And then, they don't like things where, things go boom, action movies, but yet those things are selling tickets like crazy, right? So that's always been there. The memo followed condemnation from Jacqueline Moore, a transgender writer who worked on the Netflix original Dear White People, as well as criticism from Tara Field, a transgender software engineer at Netflix.
It's important to point out that Netflix does have a show called Dear White People, and they also have the Dave Chappelle special. And these people who are angry about Dave Chappelle, they don't want Dear White People gone. They're not saying, oh, we don't need this kind of politically divisive content on Netflix. They just want the content they don't like gone.
Advocacy groups, including GLAAD and the National Black Justice Coalition, also condemned the special and asked for its removal. And so then they do a quick summary of his routine. He defended J.K. Rowling, saying he was on Team TERF, an acronym for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Can you describe what a TERF is?
Yeah, it's a type of feminist who doesn't believe that women should be allowed to use, that trans women shouldn't be allowed to use the women's restroom and stuff like that. They exclude trans people, trans women as women. But if you listen to Dave Chappelle, first of all, he was joking. He said explicitly trans women are women, and he went into explicit detail about why he would rather have a trans woman using the women's room than the men's room.
He sure did.
Someone turning around.
We can't say that. We can't go into that level of detail on the radio.
No, but he cracked a funny line. Oh, you must be a veteran. Sorry. So, I mean,
you got to see it.
He made it very clear that he's not, in fact, a TERF, and that he was joking, as you would expect a comedian to do.
Let's see. As of Tuesday morning, about a week after the release, The Closer was the third most watched show on Netflix, Although it received, again, the Rotten Tomatoes low score from critics, audience members gave it a 97 out of 100. And if you translate that, the 97 out of 100 to, whether or not Netflix has lost customers, you can presume at most they've lost 3% of their customers. And that's probably not even the case. There's probably only a percentage of them that are actually willing to cancel their subscriptions.
And I suspect a bunch of the Rotten Tomatoes people who, didn't rate it very highly haven't actually seen it.
There's a good chance of that.
Have you seen it? 603-283-6160.
Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 27th through July 3rd for the 6th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out for the first time in 2021. Fork Fest takes place the week after Pork Fest, but Fork Fest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 27th through July 3rd. There's no better place to celebrate Independence Day than around other freedom-loving activists in the Shire. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there. Forkfest.party.
I'm a little obsessed with My Magic Mud. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, the founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I didn't even know my teeth were coffee stained. A week's worth of use convinced me, and now I use it every 3 or 4 days. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, and I think it cleans better, too. My Magic Mud's available at most local health food stores, Sprouts, Natural Grocers, CVS, Walmart's Natural Beauty Aisle, but I can get it for you for 20% off with coupon code FTL20 at mymagicmud.com. FTL20 mymagicmud.com.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
Don't worry about things you can't control. Isn't that what they always say? But it's about impossible to avoid worrying about what's going on these days. The government has used the war on guns, the war on drugs, and the war on terrorism to tear our Bill of Rights to shreds. But you can fight back. The 10th Amendment Center has proven it, racking up major victories. For example, when the U.S. government claimed authority in the NDAA to have the military kidnap and detain Americans without trial, the nullifiers got a law passed in California, declaring the state's refusal to ever participate in any such thing. Their latest project is offnow.org, nullifying the National Security Agency. They've already gotten model legislation introduced in California, Arizona, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas, meant to limit the power of the NSA to spy on Americans in those states. We'd be fools to wait around for the U.S. Congress or courts to roll back Big Brother. Our best chance is nullification and interposition on the state level. Go to offnow.org, print out that model legislation, and get to work nullifying the NSA. The hero Edward Snowden has risked everything to give us this chance. Let's take it. Offnow.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically 2 types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer-term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and I guess the pandemic really is coming to an end because it's been almost 3 whole weeks since YouTube kicked us off of their platform. And that seems to be happening.
Wait, we got kicked off of YouTube again?
I think we got back about 3 weeks ago, didn't we?
Okay.
From the previous kickoff. So, I mean, it's
I
been
think
like...
we're on there right now.
We are on there.
Yeah, yeah.
But it has been like 3 weeks since they kicked us. I see. I worded that badly.
Yeah.
It sounds like we've been kicked off for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah,
okay,
we're
no,
back
that's not
for
the case. We
some
are on
amount of time.
YouTube, and it has been 3 weeks since they decided, okay, I'm going to stop trying to rephrase that because that's not working out. But it happens to us quite a lot. It happens across all big tech platforms, but there's an alternative to YouTube called Odyssey. You can find our Odyssey channel at video.freetalklive.com. It's a decentralized platform. Well, Odyssey itself is a centralized front end that accesses the library network. Library is the underpinning of Odyssey. It's a decentralized blockchain-based media sharing protocol. And Odyssey is just sort of a website that people can go to see what's on library if they don't want to download the library software and all of that awesome stuff.
For the most part. The Odyssey site doesn't include pornography, and there's no bans on that on libraries. So if you care about that, you can't get it through Odyssey.
Okay, fair point.
Just so you know.
However, they don't censor us there. We actually were allowed to do an all-female topless show.
Well, that's not pornography.
It is not, but YouTube would not have allowed it.
Oh, yeah. No one else would allow that.
No. So, I mean, they're really cool over there, and a lot of people are joining them. There's now more than 1 million disaffected YouTube creators over there who are just sick of being deplatformed by YouTube, such as the guy who was making videos about the Uyghur genocide happening in China.
Mm-hmm.
He got kicked off of YouTube, so he went to Odyssey. You got to check it out. Video.freetalklive.com will take you directly to our channel. It's video.freetalklive.com. We have Tom calling from New Hampshire. Tom, you're on Free Talk Live.
Good evening. I was thinking, it took me a long time to realize what people are talking about when they speak of the state, because what they're really talking about are two distinct things blurred together as one. Even in the United States Constitution, where these people are talking about the state, the full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. In the first iteration where they say state, the state is a piece of territory with clearly defined surveyed boundaries. And in the second iteration, in the same sentence, the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, they're talking about an organization that has letterhead with a fancy-looking seal on it. And they blur them together as if they are one and the same thing, and it gets people thinking that this state is some kind of creature or organism with a being with a mind, and it's not.
This is a tactic that they use to blur, and I think blurring is the right term, as you pointed out, Tom, to confuse people to thinking that. To not really knowing what the state is, because if you say you're against the state of New Hampshire, some people would think that means you hate living here and that you don't like the trees and that you don't like, the beauty of the state. No. The land of New Hampshire is a very, very beautiful place. The state of New Hampshire is, at its core, not the land, but that is ultimately what the term is designed to confuse people into not really knowing. Like, oh, are you talking about the land? Are you talking about the government cartel?
I think Murray Rothbard talked a lot about this, how the whole concept of patriotism has been subverted by the state. The way patriotism used to be, a person had love for their homeland.
Or freedom.
For the actual land that they were from.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been co-opted by the state, and now your loyalty isn't, to the beautiful, lush forests and the mountains or whatever. It's to the United States government.
Some bureaucrats.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you something else here. As far as the debate over whether violence is or is not the answer, let me chime in. Ron Paul chimed in on that one on May 22nd, 2007. It's in the Congressional Record, page 5610. And that he says in one paragraph, peaceful, nonviolent revolutions against tyranny have been every bit as successful as those involving military confrontation. Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. achieved great political successes by practicing nonviolence, and yet they suffered physically at the hands of the state. But whether the resistance against government tyrants is nonviolent or physically violent, the effort to overthrow state oppression qualifies as true patriotism. End of quote. So
there's actually a book written by Erica Chenoweth called Why Civil Resistance Works, The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict, which argues that actually nonviolent resistance to violent people like the state has become more and more effective over time.
Yeah, because it just makes them look worse.
Yeah. So you're wrong. Yeah, Ron Paul might have not read, the latest on the studies on that as far as comparing
maybe
recent.
It wasn't written yet.
I don't know. That's a possibility, actually.
Yep.
So.
Well, thank you so much for the call tonight, Tom. I have to disagree as well with what Ron Paul said. Violence just begets more violence. Mm-hmm. It's not going to solve the problem. Only peace is going to end the problem that is violence.
It's true. You have to. Peace is the way if that's what you want.
But a lot of people don't want peace. They want anger. They want bloodshed. They want hate. Because all of American society, as far as I can tell, is just built around dividing each other and hating one another for some of the most silly reasons ever. Like someone cracking a joke, now they're your number one enemy because their joke offended you. And that's not a way a society can operate. Because first of all, that person didn't offend you. That person said a thing, and you chose to react to that with anger and hostility. You get to choose your emotions. No one else can affect them. You choose whether or not to let people have that power over you.
Boy, people don't like hearing that.
I don't care. They need to hear it because it's weak. If you let people control you like that, you're just a weak little submissive loser. You need to take control of your emotions, own them, and realize that no one else can make you feel anything. That's 100% within your control.
I totally agree with you on that, and I wonder what percentage of people are upset about hearing that statement. Oh, how dare you make me feel so angry, Aria? It's all your fault.
Yeah, but I didn't make them feel anything.
No. And that's what they're doing is they're taking the onus of control outside from themselves, where it actually is, and pretending like some other person has control over them and their emotions, which is absolutely a ridiculous concept.
It is, but a lot of people create that circumstance. They do allow themselves to be manipulated like that. Look, if I can control your emotions like that, then I can manipulate you into doing anything that I want you to do. Recognize, first of all, I don't control your emotions. You do.
Yeah.
Your internal reaction, your emotion to something someone else says is your internal reaction.
It always is, every time.
But they don't get it. And this anger we see here directed at Dave Chappelle, these people being offended, they're choosing to be offended. They're blaming Dave Chappelle for offending them and for making them. One person said she wanted to go back into the closet and quit stand up forever. I'm like, first of all, okay, drama queen.
Yeah.
Second of all, why would you choose to feel that way? Why wouldn't you choose to feel, good for Dave Chappelle for making other people laugh. I'm going to go out here and do my act and make people laugh in the way that I make them laugh. That to me is the sensible approach. But no, all of these other people, they just want to freely give Dave Chappelle control over their emotions so that they can be manipulated when he releases HBO, Netflix specials and manipulate them basically into giving him more money, as far as we can tell. $20 million per special. He's not doing bad.
Yeah, he's laughing all the way to the bank, if he's still using banks.
He probably is.
Jacqueline Moore is the transgender writer who worked for a Netflix original, Dear White People. She also writes for Peacock's Queer as Folk. Wrote on Twitter that Chappelle used to be one of her heroes, but he said he's a TERF, Moore wrote. He compared my existence to someone doing blackface. She says she's done with Netflix.
Did he? I missed that part. I don't recall hearing him mention blackface.
He did. He mentioned that, yeah. That same day, Field, who's the Netflix software engineer who's also trans.
So hold on. This trans person liked Dave Chappelle when he was making racist jokes and anti-feminist and anti-woman jokes and misogynistic jokes and all of that. But when he made a joke that actually targeted her, suddenly it was too far.
We're breaking up. That same day, the Netflix software engineer criticized Chappelle in a tweet. She's also trans. For characterizing the community as thin-skinned. Quote,
well, you're proving his point.
Quote, our existence is funny to him, and when we object to his harm, we're offended, Field wrote. She said further, quote, what we object to is the harm that content like this does to the trans community, especially trans people of color, and very specifically black trans women, she added. By the way, she's white.
I don't know what harm she's talking about. First of all, what trans community, and can you even harm an esoteric, non-existent thing that isn't tangible?
Well, isn't it called The Collective? I don't think you talked about that on the air.
I have not talked about that yet, but I was accused of going against, quote, The Collective. Both the and collective were capitalized here. So, gotta be the board. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments around the world killing innocent people? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin is money that cannot be inflated or controlled by any state. By continuing to use their money, you're perpetuating the killing. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available to you now. Learn it, use it, spread it.
Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. It's Bitcoin.com. Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. Meanwhile, IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva will remain in her position after a data rigging investigation cleared her of wrongdoing. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
The IMF's latest World Economic Outlook predicts 5.9% growth this year, down slightly from the 6% projection that it issued in July. COVID-19 and supply chain disruption are the main factors slowing growth around the world. The IMF says it's a modest downgrade, but some developing countries are being hit much harder. Next year's projection from the IMF of 4.9% growth remains unchanged. Meanwhile, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva had been accused of pressuring staff to alter data to favour China. She denied the claims, and now an investigation has expressed full confidence in her, meaning she keeps her job.
The UK has called on the European Union to negotiate a new Northern Ireland protocol to ease post-Brexit tensions. The EU will set out its proposals on Wednesday. UK correspondent Ollie Barrett reports.
UK Brexit Minister Lord Frost says current arrangements for Northern Ireland are unsustainable.
The protocol is not working. It's completely lost consent in one community in Northern Ireland. It's not doing the thing it was set up to do. It has to change.
The protocol was agreed to govern trade between Northern Ireland and the rest of Britain, while also ensuring no hard border arose between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Lord Frost, speaking in Lisbon, said the way it's being implemented and its governance need to be amended. The European Commission will set out its proposals on Wednesday, but Lord Frost has effectively just rejected some of what Brussels is expected to suggest. The EU believes the UK should respect an agreement it signed. Lord Frost says the EU behaves as if it doesn't want the UK to succeed.
A US Navy nuclear engineer and his wife, charged for trying to sell nuclear submarine secrets to a foreign country, could face life in prison. Federal prosecutors say they're seeking continued detention for Jonathan and Diana Toby out of concern that they may try to flee the country. The couple, who have 2 children, allegedly tried to sell nuclear submarine design data. They were arrested on Saturday during what officials said was their latest dead drop of information to a person they thought was a foreign spy. In fact, it was an undercover FBI agent. The US Justice Department said they hid small data cards in everyday objects, including a peanut butter sandwich. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at the latest signs of the travel industry making a slow return to some semblance of normalcy. The Prime Minister of Thailand announced on Monday that the country will ease travel restrictions for vaccinated visitors from 10 countries, including the US, the UK, Germany, Singapore and China.
For a big country like Thailand to come forward now and say, we are ready to welcome back a lot of the world, if you're including the UK and the US, then that is good news all around.
Aviation analyst Alex Machera says it's the most positive sign yet that long-haul designations in Asia may soon be accessible again to millions of holiday and business travellers.
We're talking about a continent that is still today pretty much off limits to the rest of the world. But what we've seen slowly is a few countries almost brave it with their policies. Singapore said that they accept that they will have to live with COVID rather than chase that zero COVID strategy. Now, just a few days later, the Thai Prime Minister, in a televised address, saying to them ultimately that they will allow fully vaccinated visitors.
For Thailand alone, the numbers are extraordinary. 40 million people visited the country in 2019, generating $60 billion in revenue. In the first 8 months of this year, there were just 74,000 tourist arrivals. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. The UK has called on the European Union to negotiate a new Northern Ireland protocol to ease post-Brexit tensions. And a US Navy nuclear engineer and his wife, charged for trying to sell nuclear submarine secrets to a foreign country, could face life in prison. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
Sea anemones are the most disgusting of all tidal creatures. Their thick tentacle arms are engorged with the collected urine that makes up much of tide pools. Whale urine, fish urine, otter urine, crab urine, all sucked up by the moon and deposited in these natural outhouses. Clownfish share a symbiotic relationship with sea anemones. The clownfish cleans the sea anemone. In exchange, the anemone sprays urine on the face of the clownfish. It's one fetishistic delight. Contrary to popular belief, sea urchins are not in fact animals. Indeed, they are not alive at all. They are simply the clumped together leavings of the ocean's denizens.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, where you can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever is important to you. We've been discussing Dave Chappelle's latest comedy skit that has upset at least a few people from the trans community, but maybe you don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about something that's important to you. 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Arya and Ian.
Yes.
And there's been a story going around expanding just continually over the last several weeks that I don't think anyone has discussed here on Free Talk Live. And that's the ongoing supply shortages that are getting significantly worse. The cargo ships that are just circling off of ports, unable to dock, presumably because there's no staff to work at these places. And I'm honestly starting to wonder, maybe COVID is worse than what the government has led us to believe.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that particular conspiracy theory just doesn't get talked about anymore, right? But initially from China, we saw these videos that I since believe are, were probably faked or taken out of context or something. People just dropping dead in the streets, right?
Never happened.
No, clearly not. But where the hell is everyone that all of these places, shipping industries, grocery stores, gas stations, everyone is short on staff? My only assumption has to be they all dropped dead from COVID.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, because I would, if that was the case, I would obviously know at least a few people who had died from it.
Yeah, I mean, you'd start hearing about landlords finding, corpses around, and so-and-so didn't show up to work because they're dead.
Well, the government's burying all of those stories. They're giving the landlords hush money.
No, that's a conspiracy theory, and I've never even heard anything like that.
No, I'm surprised that conspiracy theory doesn't exist, is essentially what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I certainly don't believe that to be the case, but I'm looking around at the economy going, this is not going to end well.
Well, the government has the interest in making this thing seem bigger than it is. So the theory you're talking about would allege that the opposite is happening, that the government is actually purposely downplaying numbers and that the deaths are actually higher than what they're reporting. Now, I think the reality is the opposite, which is that the numbers they're reporting are higher than the reality, as we've seen from nurses who are still working, saying, hey, look, we're not even reporting a lot of these vaccination side effect stories. Like, a lot of that stuff's just going completely unreported. So we don't really even know how many people are dying from the vaccines. But as far as the COVID, we know that they're over-reporting that, because anybody that's got some sort of health issue who also tests positive for COVID and they croak, they're just chalking them up as COVID, even though COVID may not have actually had any factor in killing them.
Well, it's a good thing they didn't test Michael Hampton for COVID-19. When he died.
Yeah, our friend and IT guy.
Yeah, because he may have tested positive, and then even though he was battling stage 4 cancer that had progressed to the liver, and it's completely obvious what would have killed him, they would have written him down as a COVID-19 death.
Well, he actually did have COVID earlier this year, if I recall correctly, and he beat it.
Yes, despite being in chemo.
Yeah.
I mean, with no immune system whatsoever.
Right. He beat it.
The 60-year-old cancer patient beat it.
Was he 60? I knew he was in his 50s.
I don't know his exact age.
I don't think he'd hit 60 yet. I think he was in his mid-50s.
But either way, he survived it. So that was the point at which I was like, yeah, this is blown way out of proportion.
Absolutely.
So I'm with you on this. I think the numbers are drastically overreported because I still only know the one person who died of COVID-19, and he was a severely unhealthy, obese, diabetic 60-something-year-old in Mississippi.
I mean, we've talked about this issue before, and you've asked the question, and I've asked the question, like, why aren't people working? And it seems like the most obvious example or the most obvious reason is they're being paid not to.
Is that still ongoing, though? I heard the unemployment benefits ended.
Well, I don't think all unemployment benefits have ended. I think it's just the unemployment bonuses have ended. So they were giving out extra unemployment on top of whatever the normal unemployment would be. And
they were encouraging people to stay home and not work.
And a lot of people have probably moved back in with their parents.
I've heard that as well, but I mean, maybe if I was still in Mississippi, I would be seeing and hearing about more of that, but I haven't heard about that here in New Hampshire. But New Hampshire's different.
But I agree with you. All of that said, it's still not a real satisfying answer. None of that is like, oh, well, that makes sense. It still doesn't satisfy. Like, what is really going on out there?
That's a good way of putting it, because none of those answers satisfy me as I look around, and like the hotel that I stayed at had, from what I could tell, 3 total employees there who had to live there because, well, I don't know if they had to live there, but it made their jobs more convenient if they just stayed at the hotel.
Well, Inkblot on our chat server, the Matrix chat server, which you can access over at chat.freetalklive.com, he says all COVID unemployment is gone as of September. Bonus and money given to the states from the feds to extend the base unemployment benefits. Okay, but still, there's people who aren't working. And in New Hampshire, we've got a relatively low unemployment rate, all things considered.
It's like 3-point-something%.
Yeah,
right?
It was 2.9, 3%, something like that, which is right around where it was pre-COVID. So, like, technically, unemployment is back to where it was. But remember, unemployment numbers, they don't actually include people who are jobless. They only include people who are jobless and are looking for work,
But in order to get unemployment, don't you have to prove that you are looking for work? I thought that you did.
But what I'm saying is there's people out there who are not showing up on the unemployment numbers, obviously, right? Or the employment numbers, right? There's people out there that are not being counted because they're not on that system or whatever. They're not looking for a job. They're just living off of somebody else or whatever the story is.
Probably their parents.
Yeah, whatever the story is there. Maybe they're crypto wealthy. I don't know.
Seems unlikely for the majority of people.
It does seem unlikely, but that's why it's like, well, we have this low unemployment rate, but yet there's jobs everywhere. So how does that work? Because it wasn't that way 2 years ago.
No. So where did everyone go? I don't know. And I wish I knew because
you work at a place. Have you ever thought of reaching out to whoever the hell isn't going to work anymore and just saying, "Hey, how's it going? What's going on with you? Just curious, why aren't you coming back to work? Do they have another job somewhere else, or are they literally just sitting around, living off welfare?"
One reason or another, other people, it's usually that they've taken on another job. That's usually the case. But that doesn't explain, where the staffing issues at the other places came from, that they also needed employees. And it seems like no matter where you look, places are at 60, 70% of what they should have on staff in order to handle the business they're doing.
Yeah, we were just talking with a guy who made the move up here. He showed up at a social Sunday this week, a dude named Tom came out from California, actually, and was talking with him about getting work, and he's talking about applying at some pizza places, and we're like, well, from what we hear, they're pretty desperate. They're closing early because they don't have enough people to stay open past 10 o'clock. And all of the fast food places
One person in our
bad.
company said, we will hire anyone with a pulse at this point.
It's that bad.
Yeah.
And another guy was asking, well, can I get a job without getting a coronavirus vaccination or mask mandates? And I said, I bet you if you applied to 20 different places, you'll find some of them that are willing to take you, even if you're not vaccinated and or willing to, if you're unwilling to wear a mask. Somebody's just going to be like, I need people.
Yeah,
and they're going to hire
I'm sure
you.
someone will look the other way.
Yeah. And there's no mandate in New Hampshire for that. That's just all corporate policy at this point. If a store is requiring employees to wear a mask, that's not coming down from the governor at this point. That's coming down from their CEO or their board of directors or whatever.
Yeah. It's certainly not coming from the government, but it is coming down, and that is the policy at a lot of places. I hate going into places and see employees having to wear masks.
It's tiresome.
Because it's always the employees have to wear it. The customers never do.
Not that I would put one on if they said I had to.
No, I wouldn't either. I would just go somewhere else. Especially now that it's not, ubiquitous across the city.
Inkblot makes an interesting point here in the chat room. He says the real problem is all the immigrant labor from south of the border hasn't come back. Now, I
don't know how much that would affect New Hampshire, though.
Yeah, I don't know either. I know that there are some people, for instance, at the Jamaican restaurant, she's from Jamaica, and she actually does have some staff from Jamaica, I think. So, it may still have some effect on us, but obviously it would seem like that would affect the southern tier of states more heavily than it would New England.
Either way, the staffing issues are creating other issues. There's a huge supply chain issue that is bubbling, and it's going to get pretty bad from what I can tell.
Well, it may already be bad where you are. If you're noticing shelves are empty, give us a call.
603-283-6160. That's the number. I haven't seen empty shelves, but I've heard about them even here in Keene. 603-283-6160.
Breaking weather news. Belize is sunny and around 82 degrees every day this week.
What's the forecast for your life? If current politics and economic prospects are cramping your freedom, escape to the tropics. ECI Development has affordable second homes for you to own or rent in Belize and other tropical countries. Places with stable governments and growing economies. Secure your freedom now. To find out more, send an email to ftl@ecidevelopment.com.
When a lunar observatory detects a radio broadcast originating from Proxima Centauri, the nations of Earth discover their first contact with an alien race may also be their last. With the Proximans facing an extinction-level disaster, Earth must choose between sending a ship on a multi-year journey or allowing nature to take its course. Saving Proxima, a hard science fiction thriller by Travis S. Taylor and Les Johnson from BaneBooks.com.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it! You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at bitcoin.com. That's bitcoin.com.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit shiresociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at shiresociety.com. That's shiresociety.com. Some of you asked, and now we've delivered. LRN.FM's live Keene, New Hampshire studio shows are now streamed in HD on Twitch. Visit our channel at twitch.lrn.fm and give it a follow. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free subscription on Twitch. If you use it on our channel, Twitch will give LRN.FM a monthly piece of your Prime subscription cost. So please watch, follow, share, and subscribe to twitch.lrn.fm. That's twitch.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, where you can talk about whatever is important to you. Take control of the airwaves. 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And last year, we told you about Intercoin, which can help any business or organization launch their own currency or raise money using their own token. Now, Intercoin.org has launched worldwide. So if there's a token you want to launch or an app you want to build, go to Intercoin.org. Enter your email address, and the team there will get in touch with you and learn about your needs. And while you're at it, if you want, get some Intercoins for yourself. That's intercoin.org, INTER coin.org. We've been ignoring, not meaning to ignore, there's so much to talk about that it's hard to talk, it's impossible to talk about everything. So you got to pick and choose what you want to talk about. But this is an important one, and we have neglected to discuss this thus far. The huge shipping issues that are going on throughout the world right now. And it's not just a United States problem, it's also a China problem. It's a worldwide problem of just stuff not being shipped. As far as I can
apparently
tell.
Stuff is being shipped.
Okay, correct. But it's not being dealt with.
Literally just piling up at the ports. It's either piling up in the port or it's piling up outside of the ports as ships wait to offload their cargo because the ports can't handle it.
And we both have stories about this. Let's start with yours, because yours is the more generalized one.
I've got an actually really interesting piece. It's a little lengthy, but it really gets into some detail. The headline is actually written a few days ago, so it's fairly recent, because this has been going on for, like the news has been coming out about this for the last few weeks. And there was another headline that I've had in show prep for at least 2 weeks now about how there are 500,000 shipping containers. You know how large these things are, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of one right here. I mean, it's got hundreds of massive crates stacked on it.
Yeah, the shipping the crates are the shipping containers. There's 500,000 of those at least sitting at, and this was as of a couple weeks ago, and I don't think it's cleared up, sitting off the California coast. There's another headline from this just came out.
500,000. That is a lot of stuff. I hope that stuff doesn't expire.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know how much of it is perishable. It's a good question. And then nearly 80,000 shipping containers are actually piled up in the port of Savannah. So the 500,000 are off the coast of California, and the 80,000 shipping containers are stacked in the port of Savannah, according to a report.
Is Savannah in California?
Sorry, that's Georgia.
Okay.
So both coasts, right? This is happening both coasts. And the report here on the Savannah report is from yesterday. The people working at the port say nearly 80,000 containers are stacked up. That's 50% more than they usually have. So there's serious problems with product moving to the shelves here in the United States. And Andy Serwer and Max Zahn at Yahoo Finance have a story here called The Crazy Shipping Crisis Explained. So let's get into it. Say, as we head closer to the second anniversary of the pandemic, it's clear we've made progress fighting COVID-19. They say great progress. We have testing and vaccines that work, they claim. So here's your propaganda from the
the testing
government people.
Did not work, as we since learned.
They've thrown out the PCR test, right?
Yes, because it couldn't detect the difference between the flu and COVID-19. So if you were wondering where the flu went last year, there's your answer.
So I'm going to skip the propaganda paragraphs here, and they say, no doubt you've heard how the world's supply chain is being stressed like never before, resulting in shortages and delays in everything from semiconductors to cars, sneakers, exercise equipment, and Rolexes. Initially, this was because factories in Asia, for example, had to close for weeks or even months because workers were sick with the coronavirus. That was true and still is the case in Vietnam, for instance. Now the pain point has shifted to ships. What we're witnessing is a massive, unprecedented traffic jam of humankind's largest sea vessels that is at the very core of the conundrum. A board member of a large shipping company whose family's been in the business for decades said, quote, I don't think anyone's ever seen anything like this in their careers, anyone who's alive, unquote.
Well, if the government had gotten out of the way and just let the market do its thing, not paid people to sit at home, not encouraged people to sit at home and do nothing, this wouldn't be happening.
It would certainly be less impactful, right? Like if there actually was a terrible pandemic that was killing people and businesses closed their factories, that probably would cause some hiccups.
Sure.
But the government absolutely...
there would also be fewer people to buy the things that were on shelves, so it would probably balance out.
You're talking if there was an actual deadly pandemic,
yes.
And certainly the government exacerbated everything that we're going to talk about here, for sure. Steve Ferreira of shipping consultancy Ocean Audit calls it Containergeddon. How bad is it?
Like that.
How did it happen? And what does it mean going forward? How will this impact the U.S. economy, and how and when does it get resolved? Starting at the beginning, first understand that 90% of the world's global trade is shipped by sea, with 70% of it in containers. Over the past 2 decades, a number of trends have shaped the business. First, when it comes to the United States, we have been increasing our outsourcing and reliance on imported goods. For example, in January of 1985, which is as far back as data is available, we imported $293 million worth of goods from China. Flash forward to today. In August of this year, our imports from China totaled nearly $43 billion. So that's a huge jump. That's up 146-fold in 36 years. Now, obviously, there's inflation between now and then, but still, that's a lot. Our imports from Asia across the board are up. China's the #1 exporting nation to the United States, but Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam are also on the top 10. Second, companies and consumers increasingly count on what's called just-in-time inventory systems to order goods. That makes for lower inventories, which reduces costs for U.S. companies and allows consumers unprecedented immediate gratification from a global cornucopia of goods.
So this is basically they're not building up a huge inventory of things because they know they will get if they sell out, they'll get a new shipment of stuff probably scheduled the next day or whatever.
Yeah. So, for example, if Pottery Barn needs 50 couches from China, they order it, and 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, the couches are there on the west coast of the United States. Third, the shipping business over the past decade has not been very profitable. A freaking nightmare, according to my source, until now, which meant that there was little investment in new ships. Meanwhile, in the United States, railroads have been cutting costs and reducing headcount.
But it's profitable now, so why aren't they making money and hiring people to solve these problems?
Well, why aren't they hiring people at your business where you work?
Good question.
More than 22% of the jobs at railroads, Union Pacific, CSX, and Norfolk Southern have been eliminated since 2017, when CSX implemented a cost-cutting system called precision scheduled railroading that most other U.S. railroads then later copied. Of course, this is a corporate thing, right? Like if you can cut jobs and increase profits, then that's what they're going to do. The largest U.S. railroad and the only one that BNSF, the largest U.S. railroad and the only one that hadn't expressly adopted that model, has still made staff cuts to improve efficiency and remain competitive. What all this means is that the global supply chain, particularly the part of it that connects Asia to the U.S., has been running at full capacity with no margin for error. So, quote, when you have a problem anywhere in the supply chain, it's going to have a ripple down effect, like playing dominoes, said Kathy Robertson, the founder and president of supply chain consulting group Logistics Trends and Insights, LLC, and former market analyst at UPS. She says if freight is arriving late at port, that means the time scheduled for the truck to be at the port is wrong. Now you have to go back and reschedule.
Okay, and it just sort of cascades from there.
They're going to talk about that.
It's making sense.
Yeah.
603-283-6160. Get your Christmas presents early, though. Joe Biden saying shelves might be empty. It's Free Talk Live.
If you want to bring more liberty into your community, there's something you should see. Intercoin, the movement you might want to join. If you like Bitcoin, break through. It's true. It's truly something new. If you'd like to see real prosperity, start your own currency, boost the economy. Intercoin, the movement you might want to join. If you like Bitcoin, its impact's hard to overstate, results you can appreciate. If you're tired of relying on the state, want to make your own community great, homelessness and hunger to eliminate, let the wealth accumulate. Don't wait for the growth rate to accelerate. Go to intercoin.org and get the coins for yourself.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. A State Department spokesperson has described 2 days of talks with the Taliban in Qatar as largely positive. It was the first face-to-face meeting between the two sides since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August following the U.S. military withdrawal. FSN's U.S. correspondent Rachel Silverman has more.
State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the two sides had productive discussions about providing aid to Afghanistan, which faces a widening humanitarian crisis. Access to foreign aid as well as Afghan central bank reserves has been limited in the wake of the Taliban takeover. Washington has demanded the Taliban uphold human rights and combat terrorism in order to be recognized as a legitimate government. G20 leaders also discussed aid for Afghanistan during a virtual summit with the European Union, pledging $1 billion to support the humanitarian efforts. Rachel Silverman, Oakland.
North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, has defended his pursuit of nuclear and other weapons as necessary for self-defense in a speech according to state media. The isolated nation unveiled its largest ever intercontinental ballistic missile last year. FSN's Carolyn Malone reports from Washington.
Standing next to a variety of weapons, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un gave a speech on Tuesday detailed by state media, in which he talked of developing weapons to prevent a war, not start one. North Korea unveiled its yet-to-be-tested Hwasong-16 at a military parade last year. It's the largest ever ICBM shown publicly that's been produced by the country. North Korea is technically at war with South Korea, and a tense truce continues, but both nations are buying and developing weapons. The two Koreas restored their hotlines with each other last week, a daily call to ensure direct communication.
U.S. markets ended the day in the red after a volatile day of trading in New York. FSN's Sarah Walton reports from New York.
The Dow closed down by almost 118 points on Tuesday, or 0.3%. Losses of nearly 2.5% for Intel and a drop of nearly 2% for both Johnson & Johnson and Caterpillar contributed to the fall. Meanwhile, the S&P was down by 0.2% and the Nasdaq dropped by 0.1%. Markets have been described as being in a holding pattern ahead of the release of new consumer price index figures for September, which are due to be released on Wednesday. That's a key reading of inflation. And third quarter earnings season kicks off on Wednesday with JP Morgan Chase and Delta Airlines amongst the big names due to report first.
The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. The growth projection for 2021 is now 5.9%, down from the 6% projected in July. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You're welcome to join us, 603-283-6160. That's the call-in line if you'd like to join the show. Talk about whatever you want.
Especially if you're in the shipping business.
Yes, such as a truck driver or you work at one of these ports or something like that. I want to know what's going on and how bad it's really going to get, because the average employee out there who is keeping their eye on things probably has a pretty good idea of what's really coming. 603-283-6160. As of right now, we're looking at, I think you said 500,000 containers.
The containers, yeah. That's not the ships, but there's a bunch of ships with a lot of containers
hovering off the port of California. Yeah. 80,000 piled up at a
Savannah,
port
Georgia.
in Georgia. Yeah. It's
50% more than normal in Savannah.
Which makes it sound like they're probably operating at about 50% staff, which sounds like it would probably be about right based on what I'm seeing everywhere else.
So,
like, we went to McDonald's this morning, a friend and I, on the way out to Manchester. And of course, I don't eat McDonald's, so I didn't get anything.
Where'd you go? The one in Keene?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there were maybe 4 whole people working there.
Were they open inside or drive-through only?
They were not. It was drive-through only. Mm-hmm. And that's down versus the 8 or 10 who would have been working there at that time 2 years ago. So 50% capacity for 50% staff seems about right, based on what I'm seeing everywhere else.
So the story we've got here from Yahoo Finance is getting into detail about what's going on out there, why are things the way they are, and part of the factor that you need to consider is that the industry generally, like the retail business, relies on what's called just-in-time inventory systems, right? So when you buy something at Walmart or Target or whatever, they're, as soon as they scan it at the register, they know, okay, got to order another one of these. And so they put an order in for that. Now, they do have warehouses still, right? Walmart still has distribution centers. But in order to make it so they don't have to have a ton of inventory available, they have some at the distribution center. And then when they sell things at the stores, they place orders with their suppliers for more. That way they've always got just enough, right?
They have a good idea of how many rolls of paper towels they're going to sell over a 3-day period. And I don't know how often they receive shipments, but it's probably around every 3 days or something.
So there's an interview here with Kathy Robertson, the founder and president of Logistics Trends, which is a supply chain consulting group. And she points out that anywhere there's an issue with the supply chain, there's a ripple-down effect, like playing dominoes. So if freight is arriving late at a port, that means the truck that just arrived to pick that freight up, he's now early, and he's got to stay there and wait, right? That's not efficient. You don't want to pay somebody to stand around and wait.
Or they get dispatched to an entirely different delivery.
Right. So now you have to go back and reschedule. That'll cause delays and costs. And now you have to put those items in a temporary warehouse if you can find space, incurring additional costs for that. From there, once you finally get a truck moving it inland, you have to constantly reschedule delivery times. Having to juggle all that, monitor that, takes time, it takes people, and it costs extra money. John Porcari, the port envoy to Biden-Harris administration supply chain disruptions task force.
Oh, good Lord.
Says, we're living on our grandparents' investments here. He was appointed in August to address port congestion, as though the government's going to somehow, make this better. This is the problem they created. But anyway, as global commerce increased, as the e-commerce economy increased, we haven't made infrastructure investments keep up. Seems in the structure we're showing pre-COVID. The pandemic laid bare the underlying reality, he said. Points out that the domestic supply chain, port, rail, and trucks is almost entirely in the hands of private sector players that do very little data sharing. As though what? The government's going to somehow make this better? What, you want to put the government in charge of shipping?
I don't.
No.
Because I've seen what they do when they're in charge of something and it's run it into the ground.
Yeah. Look at every example of socialism and communism in history.
However bad the situation is now, it would be significantly worse if the government was trying to actively take control of the situation and fix it.
So they talk about when the world went into lockdown last spring, global trade slowed as factories in China and elsewhere closed. The volume of goods to ship dropped. Meanwhile, shell-shocked consumers, not knowing how long they'd be stuck at home, bought food and little else. So both supply and demand fell, ergo shipping volume and rates slumped, but not for long. By late spring 2020, it became apparent that work from home wasn't just until Memorial Day weekend. It was until, well, who knows? That's when Americans began to buy Pelotons, which is an exercise equipment brand, patio furniture, and hiking boots in earnest. As factories came back online in Asia, trade began to boom and boom and boom. All that money that once went into movie theaters, Major League Baseball games, and tropical resorts then began to go into buying stuff made in China. Today, ports in the U.S.,
that makes a lot of sense.
Particularly on the West Coast and especially Long Beach, where 36% of U.S. imports land, are unloading record amounts of cargo, and that's where the traffic jam is the worst. It's an understatement to say that demand for cargo ships is extreme. More accurate is off the charts. Check out, then they show the Howe Robinson Container Ship Charter Index, which shows the cost of chartering a giant container ship. Now, the price of that to charter a ship like this is up 10x over just the last year. The previous record was set back in June of 2005 when
so it's 10 times more expensive to get one of these cargo ships than it was
a year ago.
Just a year ago.
The previous record was set in June of 2005 when this index hit 2,093 points. So that was 15 years ago. The current number is just below 5,000 points. So it is now more than twice what it was at its previous record in 2005 and more than 10 times last year. What does that mean in practical terms? Well, shipping companies are mining money, for one. And Walmart, companies like Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, and others have responded by chartering their own ships. For how much? Well, here are a couple examples. I can't be more specific because the companies are obviously not going to give you the details. One of America's largest big box retailers just chartered a cargo ship for $80,000 a day for an entire year. A year ago, that price would have been $10,000 or $15,000 a day. Another example.
It sounds like a good decision on their part. If Walmart wants to have the goods, then they should take control of the situation. If you want something done right, do it yourself.
But there, as they point out here in a moment, there's a problem for the little guy. That, right? One of Japan's Sogo Shosha, or giant holding companies, is looking to charter a ship for $130,000 a day for 3 years, which would have cost them $20,000 a day a year ago. The company will have to put up $35 million for just the first 9 months in cash on day one. So who's going to pay for all that? Well, we are, of course, via higher-priced goods. If that doesn't scream inflation to you, you must be high. And I'm talking about non-transitory inflation, as in real inflation that sticks around for years. Obviously, he's using the definition of price inflation, not inflation, which is the increase in the money supply. But that's happening too, right? So
both things are happening.
There's all these economic factors that are pushing up the price of goods. Another issue here is that while those big companies can afford to charter their own ships to get their goods, smaller companies can't. which confers a big advantage to the big players at the expense of the little guys. Consider the economic implications of that. So, yeah, if you thought it was hard to run a small business and compete, like the local bike shop or whatever, competing with the $100 bikes at Walmart before, now it's going to be even more difficult to get your product and get the product cheaply enough to even have any chance of competing. Obviously, they can still compete on service and quality and all that, but it's going to get even tougher.
Yeah, they can't compete if they don't have product. If they literally don't have the stuff they need to fix your bicycle, then they literally cannot compete with Walmart, who can just sell you a new bicycle.
Here's another couple points from a recent Washington Post story about this. This month, the median cost of shipping a standard rectangular metal container from China to the West Coast of the United States hit a record $20,586. That is almost twice what it cost in July of this year.
To one of these containers, pictured on the ship, just to ship one of those from China to the U.S.
$20,586.
So you've got to get
That's from China to the West Coast of the United States.
Yes,
a relatively short jaunt.
You've got to get significantly more than $20,000 worth of product in one of these things.
Of course, and they do. But all those products are going up in price. And again, that was twice what it cost in July.
And it was already expensive in July, presumably.
In July, it was twice what it cost in January.
How bad do you think this is going to get? It sounds to me like it's going to get pretty bad. Yeah. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You know how annoying it is when someone keeps stopping mid-sentence as though he or she were asking you a series of questions? Avoid doing that. It sounds unnervingly tentative, and it imposes upon the listener to help you complete the thought. And if you're a job seeker, this alone could be a deal killer. An effective communicator sounds more confident. Complete the thought. Avoid making the listener impatient. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. Cutting through the clutter rather than blending into the blah, blah, blah will help you connect better no matter what the conversation. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook. survivalspeech.com.
The LRN.FM social media channels have been revamped. We've eliminated Facebook and focused on other platforms like Twitter and Mastodon, the decentralized alternative to Twitter. On our accounts, you'll find posts from multiple LRN.FM show hosts together in one place. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.lrn.fm, or better yet, move to the decentralized Mastodon social media platform at toot.lrn.fm, toot.lrn.fm. I think you'll like it.
Should you be able to earn an honest living free from senseless government interference? The Institute for Justice thinks so. That's why we've spent years defending hard-working men and women from pointless government regulations. Nationwide, IJ has created opportunity by reducing government power. But there is still more work to be done. Visit our website today at ij.org. Let IJ take care of the government so you can take care of your business.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You're invited to join us. 603-283-6160 if you want to weigh in. That's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And you may have noticed Conan isn't here tonight. If you've been listening for the last week, you would probably, and didn't hear the update yesterday, you may be expecting an episode of Freer Talk Live tonight, where Conan and I were going to eat increasingly hot peppers, I think starting with jalapenos, going on to habaneros, and then skipping a whole lot of classes of peppers to jump straight to the ghost pepper. And then finally, the Carolina Reapers that he grew. And we're still doing that, but it got delayed because he had to work tonight. We're doing it next week. That's October the 19th, Freer Talk Live at 10:30 p.m., only at video.freetalklive.com. That's where you can watch it. It's going to be great. There's really no point to it other than we're going to sit around and try to talk about stuff while we eat progressively hot peppers and try not to have heart attacks or brain damage or whatever it is that, people supposedly get from Carolina Reapers. I've eaten 2 of these things. They were dehydrated, but I don't think that actually affects the capsaicin level.
I wouldn't think it would.
I wouldn't think it would either. But eating them was pretty bad, but it was far worse the next day because you feel it at every interval as it makes its way through your system. And there's nothing pleasant about it. And I remember saying, I'm never eating another Carolina Reaper. And yet here I am again because I'm that stupid. And Conan, of course, has never eaten one. But, But I'm stupid enough to do it again. And we're going to do it next Tuesday night, 10:30 p.m. on Freer Talk Live, video.freetalklive.com. If you want to watch us torture ourselves and try to hold it together as long as we can, video.freetalklive.com. It's going to be great.
Maybe you guys can start a new viral trend, the Reaper Challenge. That hasn't been done yet? Somebody's got it done.
I think the closest thing would be, Carolina Reapers aren't really easy to get. I think they're difficult to grow, and there's something weird with the seeds where I don't think you can reuse them or something. But the one chip challenge was pretty popular for a while, and of course a lot of people were just overreacting. I found it relatively mild, and then ate 2 Carolina Reapers to follow it with, and that was where I tapped out. That was too much.
So we're talking about the shipping situation.
We are.
And it's pretty ugly out there with a ton of shipping containers waiting to be delivered to the ports on the west and the east coast. A ton of them just getting stacked up in the ports as well. And the story that we're sharing here from Yahoo Finance was just trying to do an overview of an explainer of why this situation exists.
And they're doing a really good job. They make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and now what they're talking about is the shipping container cost, the actual cost of shipping a container from China to the west coast of the United States. It has hit a record $20,586. Which is twice what it cost in July, which is then twice what it cost in January. So the cost of what it was in July was twice what it was in January, and it's up quite a bit. There was another story we read about within the last week or so about this, looking at the cost of just the shipping containers. It was like $2,000 or $3,000 prior to the so-called pandemic.
And now it's $20,000.
Now it's $20,000. So it's basically 10x'd in the last 2 years. And of course, all of this is because of, this crazy situation with the governments of the world, because it's not just the United States, it's all of the central banks of the world. They're all in print mode when it comes to, the money supply.
Sure, and it makes sense that people are buying more stuff because they're not going to resorts and stuff like that. I never thought about that particular aspect of it. I've heard that it's true. Conan, who was supposed to be on with us tonight, delivers mail, and he says that, packages are up.
Yep.
But I never really thought about how badly that would actually impact the supply chain.
So here's more from the story. The 7 largest publicly traded ocean carriers, this is, by the way, a quote from the Washington Post about this, including companies such as Maersk Costco and Hapag-Lloyd, reported more than $23 billion in profits in the first half of this year, compared with just $1 billion in profits in the same period last year. So they're very busy. The Post article...
And they're making plenty of money.
Right, but they don't have anywhere to put the products.
Well, presumably they would have enough money in a perfect world to build more places to put the products.
Yeah, if the government would just let you open up a new port.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, unfortunately in, California and every other government gang around the United States, that there's all kinds of bureaucratic regulations that would stand in the way of something like that.
I imagine ports are heavily regulated.
I imagine so. The Post article goes on to describe a system in the U.S. where shippers, ports, truckers, and railroads don't communicate with each other nearly enough or as much as in other countries. It's also the case that truckers are overworked and overwhelmed. There are reportedly now 16 containers waiting for every available truck at the port of L.A.
Good Lord. How many containers fit on? Oh, it's just one, isn't it?
One.
Yeah.
Railroads are scrambling to hire workers, and they're saying hire back workers. So just how bad...
Here's an idea. Don't fire them for not being vaccinated.
Yeah.
Or start explicitly hiring people who aren't vaccinated. If you want employees, that's the way to do it. Hey, we don't care. Unvaccinated, you're not going to have to wear a mask. You're not going to have to take a COVID test. I guarantee you get applicants. And also, don't drug test them.
Just how bad is that traffic jam off Southern California now? And again, this story was just three days ago that it was written. At last count, there were 60 ships lined up off of Long Beach, LA. There were some delays there even pre-COVID, and then they give you some satellite pictures of that. There are now too many to anchor. New ships are just being told to drift in deep water. A few weeks ago, it was even worse. Last month, Popular Science reported that a record 88 ships were sitting on the horizon, forming a line of vessels stretching south over 40 miles from the entrance of the Port of Los Angeles all the way down to Dana Point. If 60 ships doesn't sound like much, understand that these ships are monsters, carrying as many as 23,000 TEUs, what are called 20-foot equivalent units. Those shipping containers, that's the industry term for them.
20,000 per ship?
23,000 20-foot equivalent units per cargo ship times 60. Okay,
that's quite a lot of stuff.
Or half of that number of FEUs, which are 40-foot equivalent units, the latter being the more common intermodal size that you see trucks hauling. Each FEU container can hold up to 29 tons of product. So, example, an average dishwasher weighs 77 pounds and displaces some 16 cubic feet. And yes, he's factored in the packing materials. So one 40-foot container, which can hold up to 58,000 pounds and about 2,000 cubic feet of cargo, could contain roughly 125 dishwashers. In theory, then, doing the math, a single ship could hold 1.4 million dishwashers, which is about 16% of the total number of dishwashers shipped in the U.S. in a recent year. Unfortunately, as is the case of bad storms for air travel or a car crash for a highway trip, the delays are spreading. Shippers have been bypassing choked West Coast ports and sending vessels east to Savannah and New York. Now there are 24 ships off of Savannah, which is unprecedented, and 7 to 9, depending on which day you count, off of New York City. Volume coming in is overwhelming the facilities in both locales. Everyone is so focused on Los Angeles and Long Beach that the other ports are getting passes, said Senior VP of Global Ocean at Seco Logistics. Savannah is a mess, and New York and New Jersey ports are a mess. So you have got a royally screwed up situation.
And so in order to get away from the situation that they're experiencing in California, they're just going around and trying to visit a different port because they don't want to wait in a line of 60-something cargo ships.
I mean, it's even if it's further, right, to go from the west, you're going from China, so to go all the way over to Savannah, you got to go through the Panama Canal, right? Like there's a long journey. So you're going extra distance, spending extra money on fuel, but then again, you'd be spending money, just sitting out there waiting. So
and you don't have no idea how long you're going to be waiting if you just sit there.
Right.
One truck for every 19 containers, I think you said.
Yeah, the whole time you got to pay that crew on that container ship. The crisis has brought out bad behavior and unintended consequences. First, fear of shortages has caused businesses big and small, never mind consumers, to engage in precautionary orders, which is like hoarding, in anticipation of delays. This, of course, only exacerbates the problem by stuffing more goods into the supply chain. Then there's also additional air pollution created by the ships waiting in those traffic jams. And you have wingnuts posting false information on social media, like this gem, quote, "There are now 56 cargo freighters anchored off the coast of California from Oakland to Long Beach in what can only be considered a manufactured supply chain halt," unquote. And this is what some of us, have seen on social media, claiming that this is all some sort of cooked up plot. He says this is not a manufactured halt. The Washington Post reports that shippers, quote, "often decline to send containers inland to collect American farm exports, preferring to rush them back to Asia to capitalize on high eastbound freight rates. That's why the LA port exports 3 times as many containers as full ones." So we can continue. There's a little bit more.
So basically they're saying they don't wait around to take a shipment from the United States back to China. They just rush back off to China?
Well, it sounds like it.
603-283-6160. It sounds like it's going to get a lot worse than it is right now because people are going to start panicking as soon as they start seeing those empty shelves.
Yeah.
603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Breaking weather news. Belize is sunny and around 82 degrees every day this week.
What's the forecast for your life? If current politics and economic prospects are cramping your freedom, escape to the tropics. ECI Development has affordable second homes for you to own or rent in Belize and other tropical countries. Places with stable governments and growing economies. Secure your freedom now. To find out more, send an email to ftl@ecidevelopment.com.
Brute force, intransigent defiance, adamantine will. These are the hallmarks of the AI tank. These gigantic machines have the firepower of an army, but they also have their own sense of honor and duty. When the world breakers arrive, battle will be joined, planets will shake, and war and peace will never be the same again. World Breakers. Stories from David Weber, Larry Correia, and more. Available August 3rd from BaneBooks.com.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. A State Department spokesperson has described 2 days of talks with the Taliban in Qatar as largely positive. It was the first face-to-face meeting between the two sides since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August, following the U.S. military withdrawal. FSN's U.S. correspondent Rachel Silverman has more.
State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the two sides had productive discussions about providing aid to Afghanistan, which faces a widening humanitarian crisis. Access to foreign aid as well as Afghan central bank reserves has been limited in the wake of the Taliban takeover. Washington has demanded the Taliban uphold human rights and combat terrorism in order to be recognized as a legitimate government. G20 leaders also discussed aid for Afghanistan during a virtual summit with the European Union, pledging $1 billion to support the humanitarian efforts. Rachel Silverman, Oakland.
North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, has defended his pursuit of nuclear and other weapons as necessary for self-defense in a speech according to state media. The isolated nation unveiled its largest ever intercontinental ballistic missile last year. FSN's Carolyn Malone reports from Washington.
Standing next to a variety of weapons, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un gave a speech on Tuesday detailed by state media, in which he talked of developing weapons to prevent a war, not start one. North Korea unveiled its yet-to-be-tested Hwasong-16 at a military parade last year. It's the largest ever ICBM shown publicly that's been produced by the country. North Korea is technically at war with South Korea, and a tense truce continues, but both nations are buying and developing weapons. The two Koreas restored their hotlines with each other last week, a daily call to ensure direct communication.
U.S. markets ended the day in the red after a volatile day of trading in New York. FSN's Sarah Walton reports from New York.
The Dow closed down by almost 118 points on Tuesday, or 0.3%. Losses of nearly 2.5% for Intel and a drop of nearly 2% for both Johnson & Johnson and Caterpillar contributed to the fall. Meanwhile, the S&P was down by 0.2% and the Nasdaq dropped by 0.1%. Markets have been described as being in a holding pattern ahead of the release of new consumer price index figures for September, which are due to be released on Wednesday. That's a key reading of inflation. And third quarter earnings season kicks off on Wednesday with JP Morgan Chase and Delta Airlines amongst the big names due to report first.
The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. The growth projection for 2021 is now 5.9%, down from the 6% projected in July. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at the latest signs of the travel industry making a slow return to some semblance of normalcy. The Prime Minister of Thailand announced on Monday that the country will ease travel restrictions for vaccinated visitors from 10 countries, including the US, the UK, Germany, Singapore and China.
For a big country like Thailand to come forward now and say, we are ready to welcome back a lot of the world, if you're including the UK and the US, then that is good news all around.
Aviation analyst Alex Machera says it's the most positive sign yet that long-haul designations in Asia may soon be accessible again to millions of holiday and business travellers.
We're talking about a continent that is still today pretty much off limits to the rest of the world. But what we've seen slowly is a few countries almost brave it with their policies. Singapore said that they accept that they will have to live with COVID rather than chase that zero COVID strategy. Now, just a few days later, the Thai Prime Minister, in a televised address, saying to them ultimately that they will allow fully vaccinated visitors.
For Thailand alone, the numbers are extraordinary. 40 million people visited the country in 2019, generating $60 billion in revenue. In the first 8 months of this year, there were just 74,000 tourist arrivals. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. A State Department spokesperson describes 2 days of talks with the Taliban in Qatar as largely positive. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, defends his pursuit of nuclear and other weapons as necessary for self-defense. And U.S. markets end the day in the red after a volatile day of trading in New York ahead of the release of key economic data. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
Coming up a little later, the 10 best careers for someone at your level of attractiveness.
Oh, but right now we have something truly incredible for you. Kenneth Quinn is a real-life psychic medium who claims that he can communicate with dead acquaintances. He's written a new book. It's called Small Talk from Beyond, Speaking with Distant Relatives and Friends of Friends Who Have Passed.
Hi, Kenneth.
Good to see you. Now,
Thank
Kenneth,
you.
You've written that you're able to connect people with the spirits of their old college professors or roommates that they didn't really know that well. When did you realize that you had this gift?
Well, it was the day after my cousin's friend's wife's funeral.
I was at home and I suddenly felt a presence in the room with me. And I heard a voice say, "It's Vicky Salchek, Dale's wife."
Wow.
We made a Tim's birthday thing a while back, and we talked about how hard it is having a cat.
Fascinating.
This has been so amazing.
This has been fabulous. Thank you, Kenneth Quinn, for being our guest. Stay with us, because coming up next, we're going to show you how to lose some of that excessive weight by constantly picking at your skin.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160. If you want to call in, change the subject, talk about whatever's important to you, or talk about the shipping shortages that we're seeing. The cargo ships floating out in the ocean 40 miles off the coast with nowhere to make port. 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
It's Ian.
And we called all of this nonsense coming. This is all government-created nonsense. It's not a manufactured crisis. It's an actual crisis caused by governments attempting to make things better, and as they always do, sucking at it and making things exponentially worse.
Yeah, they get in the way of the marketplace, and the market does the best it can to operate under whatever constrictions and restrictions are being put on it by the government gang. But, I mean, they can F things up.
And the market, of course, isn't the perfect answer, because supply and demand, they fluctuate in the market. You know, it still takes time to respond to that. So things still happen within a free market, but the government never makes it better. And this whole thing here is a result of the Chinese government telling factories they have to shut down, and the American government telling people they have to shut down and work from home. And the next thing you know, people, they can't go on vacation, so people are ordering more stuff instead of spending the money on vacation.
Right.
And it just cascades into this monumental problem.
And add to that the fact that some people who went home never went back to work.
Also
and so
true.
You don't have as many people working at the shipping yards unloading these containers from the ships, and that's why there's now, apparently, according to the story at Yahoo Finance, approximately 60 ships off the coast of California, the Los Angeles port, and there's now a couple dozen ships, I think, off the coasts of New York and Savannah as well. So there's just that's because they didn't want to wait to get into California. Well, now they're waiting on the East Coast.
But it's a much smaller weight at the very least, and each one of these ships contains 23,000 of the 20-foot containers.
Upwards of 23,000. So we're looking
I imagine
at
they pack them pretty full.
Yeah, well, we're looking at somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million shipping containers that are sitting off of just the California coast right now.
And even if they were able to make port, they wouldn't have any trucks to deliver that quantity of goods.
Correct. There are 16 containers waiting for every one truck that arrives at the port.
So we need 16 times as many truck drivers in order to deal with this level of goods flowing in.
And there's 20,000, and it costs $20,000 to ship a container from China to the West Coast.
A single container.
Yeah. And that's up like 10x from what it was just 2 years ago.
And the result of that is that huge companies are just renting their own container ships.
Yeah, they're chartering ships.
For, I think, $35 million in cash just to secure one for the next 9 months.
Yeah, they're paying like $100,000 a day, basically, 80 to 100 grand a day.
Good Lord.
For these ships.
Which is going to cause prices to go up.
Yeah, someone has to pay for this, and it's the consumer.
In addition to the prices going up as a result of the inflation, the increase in the money supply that we've been seeing for the last... The economy's really about to take a big hit, and I was talking about this with a coworker yesterday. He started the conversation by saying something to the effect of, I don't know, I'm pretty happy. I think the economy's in pretty good shape right now. And I was just like, dude.
You're not paying attention, bro.
It's about to get bad, man.
Yeah, Bitcoin's at $56,000 right now.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It's going to break a new all-time high soon. I think the old all-time high was like 62,000, something like that.
So the rest of this story from Yahoo Finance is just sort of like, well, you know, what do you do about it? And ultimately, the point gets made here that there's a staffing issue. Like, there seriously is a problem out there with this. And according to the author here, the authors, he says, I don't want to be alarmist, but it's hard to see this completely clearing up anytime soon. Experts say the snarls could be with us through 2022. Just one, for instance, said, quote, operating ships is far more difficult now. With COVID protocols, you've got 200 countries with 200 different sets of rules to deal with.
And that's going to create some problems, for sure.
Definitely. And that's probably why, and according to CNN Business, now this was actually published about 2 weeks ago, there was an open letter published at the end of September by the International Chamber of Shipping to the United Nations General Assembly, where these industry groups, it was not just the International Chamber of Shipping, there was other groups that signed on to it, and you'll hear about those coming up, but they warned of a global transport system collapse if governments do not restore freedom of movement to transport workers and give them priority to receive vaccines, as though they would want that. I'm sure there's a ton of truckers that are like, F that.
I'm sure.
A lot of the truck drivers out there, the professional drivers in the United States, those are freedom-loving people who definitely would not want those. But, you know, these are corporate groups talking to United Nations. The groups wrote in their letter, quote, global supply chains are beginning to buckle as 2 years' worth of strain on transport workers take their toll. This letter has also been signed by the International Air Transport Association, the International Road Transport Union, and the International Transport Workers Federation. Together, they represent 65 million transport workers around the planet. Quote, all transport sectors are also seeing a shortage of workers and expect more to leave as a result of the poor treatment millions have faced during the pandemic, putting the supply chain under greater threat. So they're not predicting more people being hired. They're predicting these people are just like, F this. We're going to walk away from these jobs.
It's happening a lot because, I mean, these people are getting blamed by their friends and family, I'm sure, for these shortages.
Yeah, you can only throw so many boxes a day.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're already short-staffed, and you're probably working extra hours, and you're probably just sick of it and burned out by the entire thing. I'm not surprised to hear people saying, screw this, I'm out. I'll work somewhere else. Plenty of places are hiring.
The Secretary General of the ICS said worker shortages are likely to worsen towards the end of this year because seafarers may not want to commit to new contracts and risk not making it home in time for Christmas given port shutdowns and constant changes to travel restrictions. That will help pressure on stretched supply chains and could, for example, worsen current challenges with food and fuel supply in the United Kingdom. The ITF Secretary General Stephen Cotton said the global supply chain is very fragile and depends as much on a seafarer from the Philippines as it does on a truck driver to deliver the goods. He says the time has come for heads of government to respond to these workers' needs. So...
well, if they restore freedom of movement, I'm at least okay with that. But that's the most the government should do here is just stop getting involved and let people handle things the way they need to be handled.
Here's a good reason why these guys are getting frustrated. So when Karen Marshall and her crew were told they wouldn't be allowed to go ashore upon docking in Hokkaido, Japan, it was a big hit to morale. Imagine you're trucking across the sea for however, it takes hours just to fly across. I can't even imagine how many days one of these humongous ships takes. I don't know.
They speculated like 2 to 3 weeks earlier.
Is that how long it takes?
Well, they said something to the effect of, someone orders some furniture and like 50 sofas or whatever it was, and 2 to 3 weeks later they arrive.
I don't know if that includes manufacturing time or what, but that's a good question. How long does it take for one of these humongous cargo ships? These things don't move that fast, right?
Well, they can't. Look how massive they are.
Yeah, they're huge. So how long does it take? Months? Weeks? I don't know. But it's a long time, right? Like it ain't no overnight trip. And so these guys are on this ship waiting, dealing with whatever things go wrong on the ship. They finally get to where they've been waiting to get to so they can offload, take a break, go and see the city of wherever the hell, in Japan they happen to be. And nope, sorry, pandemic says you can't come ashore. And so these guys are just like, you know what, F this isn't worth it. We can't go on shore and, see a Japanese prostitute or whatever.
I imagine the whole point of working on one of these ships is that you get to visit a lot of places.
Yeah, and now that's just not a thing. The 28-year-old chief officer of a car-carrying ship told the CNN Business, none of us knew how long it would go on for, and that was more than 18 months ago. Marshall and hundreds of thousands of seafarers like her have not been permitted shore leave ever since.
Oh, that's horrible.
After weeks aboard a ship, a couple hours on shore provides much-needed respite, but seafarers can only leave a vessel in order to travel elsewhere, which is usually to return home. Marshall considers herself one of the luckier ones because she has at least been able to make it home to the United States. She says there are people who have been stuck at sea for over a year because none of these countries are just letting people in to go to a restaurant or take a break at a bar or whatever, walk around a park.
So they're not even allowed to come home?
They can come home, but if their ship's not scheduled to go home,
yeah,
how are they going to get there?
I'm shocked more people haven't quit. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. That's Bitcoin.com.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Breaking weather news. Belize is sunny and around 82 degrees every day this week.
What's the forecast for your life? If current politics and economic prospects are cramping your freedom, escape to the tropics. ECI Development has affordable second homes for you to own or rent in Belize and other tropical countries. Places with stable governments and growing economies. Secure your freedom now. To find out more, send an email to ftl@ecidevelopment.com.
When Monster Hunter International discovers one of Isaac Newton's wardstones being auctioned off, they decide to steal it and use it to destroy the Chaos God once and for all. But a mysterious thief upends their plan, and it soon becomes a race against time as something much older and infinitely more evil awakens in the jungles of South America. Monster Hunter Bloodlines by New York Times bestselling author Larry Correia and Baen Books. Visit monsterhunternation.com for more. Free Talk Live.
Did you say that you prostituted yourself when you were 10 years old?
I was doing something of a sexual nature in return
was that
for...
a woman or a...
It was a next-door neighbor. He was probably around 16.
So he took advantage of you?
No, sir. He didn't take advantage of me.
He corrupted you morally?
No, sir. It was my choice to climb into his window. It was my choice, Lou. It was my choice to take my pants off and get into his bed. It was all my choice, Lou.
Listen to me, Ian. You do not have the right at the age of 10 to make that decision.
Don't you dare tell me what I can and can't do, Lou.
I'm telling you, he molested you.
No, Lou.
You don't even realize
Lou, you don't understand what molestation is. Molestation is unwanted sexual advances. I consented. I know you don't believe that's possible. I know me better than you know me, Lou.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Do you appreciate what we do? Help us advertise, market, and promote for just $5 a month at amp.freetalklive.com.
is Free Talk Live. You can join us, 603-283-6160 if you want to do that. That's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Arya and Ian, and Bitcoin.com is your source for everything cryptocurrency related. If you want to learn about it, just click Getting Started at the top of the page and take a few minutes out of your day to watch the videos that will teach you the basics about this world-changing information. But if you already know about Bitcoin, you can check out news.bitcoin.com. Stay up to date on all of the news and headlines that are relevant to you, all on a sleek and easy-to-use modern website, Bitcoin.com. The best place to go to learn about cryptocurrency and just stay up to date about cryptocurrency. Fantastic website, Bitcoin.com. Also, Bitcoin doing pretty well these days, perhaps as a result of the unparalleled inflation that we've been seeing for the last year. I think when we talked about it in June or July, something like 20% of the total U.S. money supply had been created in the year 2019 or something to that effect. So just insane levels of inflation.
2020, I think.
Is that what it was?
I've heard as low as 20%. I've heard as high as 40%. So I don't know what the actual numbers are, but it's large, whatever it is.
They are printing money nonstop to the extent that they're now considering just making $1 trillion platinum coin and handing it over to the Federal Reserve and being like, hey, look, we paid you $1 trillion back.
Well, they kicked the can down the road a little bit. Apparently, they did pass a increase to the debt ceiling, I guess.
Okay. Like they always do.
It's going to last until December 3rd.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was like $500 million or something like that.
I was really hoping to see a governmental collapse, but maybe in December.
Wait, not $500 million. $500 billion. Sorry.
They need $500 billion to survive another 2.5 months.
I think that was the number, if I recall correctly, like 480 billion or something like that.
That's unimaginable levels of spending money.
It's not slowing down either. So we're talking about the shipping situation out there, and it's bad, and we've gone over, some of the reasons why, but ultimately there are shipping containers and ships, cargo ships piling up at these ports all around the country.
To answer our question earlier, a viewer on YouTube, this is Tom in Baltimore, says that in 2017, it took a fully loaded cargo ship 15 to 30 days to cross the Pacific from the U.S., depending on its destination. So presumably from China to the West Coast would be the 15 days, and to New York would be the 30 days.
Okay.
But
That's a long time.
But thank you so much, Tom in Baltimore. You should, however, be watching us over on Odyssey at video.freetalklive.com, since we get kicked off of YouTube fairly often.
Yeah, definitely make the migration over there to video.freetalklive.com. So in addition to the pileup and the inability for products to move out of these ports to get to their destinations because there's people just don't want to work for whatever reason. They're not there to do the jobs. Then also there's an issue with the ships themselves, with the people on those ships. They're not allowed to leave. According to the story over at CNN Business, the international shipping unions, or whatever these groups are. These are corporate groups: International Chamber of Shipping, International Road Transport Union, the Air Transport Association. They all wrote a letter to the UN saying, hey, lay off our employees, let people move around, let people go to port without having to jump through insane hoops. So like when these ships get to where they're going, they're being told, nope, you can't get off the ship. You can't go and go down the street to a bar and take a load off. You can't go hire a prostitute or whatever it is these guys do, right? Like that's likely what some of these guys are
I imagine
into.
that's what a fair number of them do. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't go and do anything. You can't leave the ship, is what they're being told. And they've already been on the ship for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. In fact,
and some of them for months or even a year.
Yeah, according to this story, some of these guys and gals are contracted for extended periods of time. So early in the pandemic, many seafarers agreed to extend their contracts by several months to keep the supplies of products flowing around the world. The grounding of planes and border closures had made it almost impossible to move workers from one part of a world to another and to swap crews. So it was difficult. Like, in theory, once you reach a destination, if it's not your home destination, if you're like sick and tired of being on the ship and you want to walk off and quit, well, in theory, you could go and fly home from whatever airport, but not if the airlines aren't flying you anywhere.
Or
so
I
how
imagine,
do you get home?
Or, if you wanted to take a different cargo ship that was going closer to where you live, you could probably do that.
Maybe. I don't know how obvious it is where these things are going, right? Like, how do you know where all the cargo ships' itineraries are as just an employee? Anyway, going on, at the peak of the crisis in 2020, 400,000 seafarers were unable to leave their ships for routine changeovers, some working for as long as 18 months beyond the end of their initial contracts.
Oh, man, that's slavery, people. That's called slavery.
I mean, they chose to do it. It's not slavery.
Well, they didn't choose to stay on past the end of their contract.
No, they opted in.
I thought it said they were stranded.
Well, okay, it does say they were unable to leave their ships for routine changeovers. I mean, in theory, they could have just said, I don't want to work, and probably figured out some way to get home, but, what are they going to do there? Who's hiring?
Everyone's hiring.
Well, but who's hiring people with these shipping expertise? While these numbers have improved, crew changes remain a major challenge. Some travel restrictions were reimposed as a result of the coronavirus Delta variant, and transport workers continue to face a myriad of vaccine and testing requirements just to do their jobs. So this is part of what they're saying. Governments, let us, leave us alone. This is getting crazy.
I don't understand why they're having testing and vaccination requirements when
they can't leave.
Yeah, when they're stuck on a ship with one another.
Great question. Often these government arbitrary rules, right? Often these are imposed at a moment's notice, said one of the experts. Inconsistent requirements, again, there's 200 countries, so 200 different sets of requirements, constantly changing, mean that some seafarers have been vaccinated multiple times because some countries have approved only certain vaccines. He knows.
Man.
Yeah. This guy knows of at least one seafarer who has received 6 vaccine doses or 3 2-dose regimens. It's an absolute nightmare, he said. I can't understand why we don't have some sort of global standard, he told CNN Business. Meanwhile, the unequal distributions of vaccine globally means that only about 25 to 30% of seafarers, many of whom are from India and the Philippines, are even fully vaccinated, according to Platten. Coronavirus testing is also a challenge. In February, Germany unilaterally introduced mandatory PCR testing with no exemption for truck drivers, leading neighboring countries, including Italy, to impose similar restrictions to avoid having thousands of drivers stranded in their own territory. These measures affected thousands of truck drivers, particularly on the Brenner Pass between Italy and Austria, forcing them to queue for days in sub-zero temperatures with no food or medical facilities. They say
It's amazing they didn't walk off the job.
Yeah. They say the digital COVID certificate has eased some of the pressure, but bottlenecks remain. Quote, drivers have faced hundreds of border issues and blockades throughout the pandemic. Truck drivers and the citizens and businesses that depend on those goods they move pay a heavy price for misguided COVID restrictions that do not exempt transport workers. Finally, the chief officer of that crew on that ship we were talking about that got denied port access said her crew had to do 10 COVID tests in 7 days before they were allowed to enter a shipyard in Singapore for repairs.
What is the point of that? 10 in 7 days? They're stuck on a ship. How are they going to get COVID? Are they arguing now that it just spontaneously appears?
It's crazy.
It is absolutely crazy.
That's
10
the story.
tests in 7 days.
Imagine wanting to keep your job after going through all of that.
Would you walk? I would walk. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It's Free Talk Live.
Carl Watner, longtime proponent of a voluntary society, died last December. You may have seen his articles published on his website, voluntarist.com, in his newsletter, The Voluntarist, the Mises Institute, or elsewhere over the last 40 years. His newest book, I Must Speak Out, Volume 2, The Best of the Voluntarist, is now available via Liberty Under Attack Publications. This 430-page second volume spans the years of 2000 through 2020 and includes articles by Carl Watner, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Carl Hess, Benjamin Tucker, George H. Smith, Lysander Spooner, Pete Eyre, Joyce Brand, and many others. I Must Speak Out is for the newly initiated, the veteran voluntarist, or anywhere in between. Buy the book now at libertyunderattack.com/voluntarist. For more great content on building a voluntary society and for Carl's extensive archives, check out voluntarist.com.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. A State Department spokesperson has described 2 days of talks with the Taliban in Qatar as largely positive. It was the first face-to-face meeting between the two sides since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August following the U.S. military withdrawal. FSN's U.S. correspondent Rachel Silverman has more.
State Department spokesperson Ned Price said the two sides had productive discussions about providing aid to Afghanistan, which faces a widening humanitarian crisis. Access to foreign aid as well as Afghan central bank reserves has been limited in the wake of the Taliban takeover. Washington has demanded the Taliban uphold human rights and combat terrorism in order to be recognized as a legitimate government. G20 leaders also discussed aid for Afghanistan during a virtual summit with the European Union, pledging $1 billion to support the humanitarian efforts. Rachel Silverman, Oakland.
North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has defended his pursuit of nuclear and other weapons as necessary for self-defense in a speech according to state media. The isolated nation unveiled its largest ever intercontinental ballistic missile last year. FSN's Carolyn Malone reports from Washington.
Standing next to a variety of weapons, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un gave a speech on Tuesday detailed by state media, in which he talked of developing weapons to prevent a war, not start one. North Korea unveiled its yet-to-be-tested Hwasong-16 at a military parade last year. It's the largest ever ICBM shown publicly that's been produced by the country. North Korea is technically at war with South Korea, and a tense truce continues, but both nations are buying and developing weapons. The two Koreas restored their hotlines with each other last week, a daily call to ensure direct communication.
U.S. markets ended the day in the red after a volatile day of trading in New York. FSN's Sarah Walton reports from New York.
The Dow closed down by almost 118 points on Tuesday, or 0.3%. Losses of nearly 2.5% for Intel and a drop of nearly 2% for both Johnson & Johnson and Caterpillar contributed to the fall. Meanwhile, the S&P was down by 0.2% and the Nasdaq dropped by 0.1%. Markets have been described as being in a holding pattern ahead of the release of new consumer price index figures for September, which are due to be released on Wednesday. That's a key reading of inflation. And third quarter earnings season kicks off on Wednesday with JP Morgan Chase and Delta Airlines amongst the big names due to report first.
The International Monetary Fund has cut its global growth forecast as the pandemic continues to hamper recovery. The growth projection for 2021 is now 5.9%, down from the 6% projected in July. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, where you're invited to join us. 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. That's 603-283-6160. With you tonight is Aria and Ian, and if you were worried about not being able to buy your grandmother a cheap Walmart sweater or some kind of nonsense like that for Christmas because of these shipping issues and these just supply issues in general, we have bad news for you. It's actually a bit worse than that. There was a rubber shortage that may or may not have been mentioned here on the show back in July, I think.
Yeah, no, it's been sitting in my show prep. It's one of those stories just never got to.
Yeah, it happens. But it's having ramifications now, in several months later, that could be significantly worse than the cargo ships sitting off the coasts of California. In this case, tractors may be unable to get tires. There appears to be some sort of shortage of tractor tires, and if your farmer can't replace their tires, they can't really farm. And that's a significant problem.
Yeah, this is pretty bad. And the story from July there's not a lot of detail in it, but a professor that is, I guess, looking at the shortage in the rubber industry says we could be on the cusp of a rubber apocalypse. They're talking
a container-geddon and a rubber apocalypse.
Yeah. Rubber, of course, is a critical raw material needed for car tires, personal protective equipment, such as masks and gloves, and many more everyday products. And, of course, then they're talking about the supply chain issues that were present in July. Remember, the last story we were discussing is that shipping container costs have doubled since just July. So, I mean, there were issues over the summer, and they're worse now. They're not better. And so now, fast forward to a story published today by Reuters about a farmer, and he's not the only one, who can't find tires for his combine harvester. Any spare tires. Dale Haddon cannot find any spare tires for his combine harvester. So the Illinois farmer...
I don't know what that is, but it sounds like it's probably necessary on a farm.
Yep. So the Illinois farmer told his harvest crew to avoid driving on the sides of the road this autumn to avoid what could be metal scraps that have been, swept aside from car accidents or whatever that happen. So if, normally if you see a tractor, they try to keep out of the road, right? Like they don't want to get in the way of traffic, so they're driving on the side of the road. Not now. He's like, you guys got to just drive in the center lane, because if you pop this tire, that's it. New ag supply in Kansas is pleading with customers to order parts now for spring planting of 2022. And in Iowa, farmer Corbett Holub is locking up his machinery inside his barn each night after thieves stole hard-to-find tractor parts from a local Deere & Co. dealership. Quote, "You try to baby your equipment, but we're all at the mercy of luck right now," he said.
So we're at a point where people are stealing from tractor supply shops?
Sounds like it.
That's terrible.
This according to a fourth-generation corn and soybean farmer in Iowa. Manufacturing meltdowns are hitting the U.S. heartland as the semiconductor shortages that have plagued equipment makers for months expand into other components. Supply chain woes now pose a threat to the U.S. food supply and farmers' ability to get crops out of fields. Farmers say they are scrambling to find workarounds when their machinery breaks, tracking down local welders and mechanics. Growers looking to buy tractors and combines online are asking for close-up photos of the machine's tires because replacements are expensive and difficult to find, said a founder of the Machinery Pete website, which hosts farm equipment auctions. Quote, "As harvest ends, we'll see farmers at equipment auctions not for the machinery, but for parts. We're already hearing from guys talking about buying a second planter or sprayer just for parts." For some farmers...
Well, that's good. I mean, redundancy is a good thing.
No doubt.
And there doesn't appear to have been any in the supply industry, so the farmers are just creating their own redundancy systems.
And the market's doing what it can with a effed up situation. I mean, it's not as bad as communist Russia, where there were no parts available ever for anything, and you literally had to go to America to find the thing that you wanted to get.
I mean, at least here in America, in the relatively free market that we have, a farmer can just buy a second piece of equipment.
For now.
That's true.
At their small welding shop in Western Washington, the Rami and Bob Warburton can barely keep up with all the orders from farmers needing something repaired, from fittings for irrigation systems to a cracked bulldozer bucket. Quote, "We're in the middle of a drought up here. At that time, they couldn't wait to water their fields for a month. The crops will be dead by then." Kinks in the supply chain, says the story here, due to the COVID-19 shutdowns in the manufacturing hubs in the U.S. and Asia, a container shortage snarling...
At least they're really, really close to pinpointing the actual problem here, which was the government shutdowns.
Yes, that's true.
They called them the COVID shutdowns, but let's be realistic, they were the government shutdowns.
Absolutely. And so they mentioned the container issue at the ports, and a dearth of workers prevent equipment manufacturers from fully cashing in on a lucrative moment when grain prices have soared to the highest in nearly a decade. The Purdue University Ag Economy Barometer, a monthly measure of farmer economic sentiment, fell 10% to its lowest level since July of 2020 in early October. Supply concerns are weighing heavily on growers, with 55% of farmers surveyed saying that low inventories have affected their plans to buy machinery. Access to steel, plastic, rubber, and other raw materials have been scarce during the pandemic, and manufacturers are preparing for even more shocks after power shortages forced several Chinese smelters to cut production in recent weeks. So
they're
looking bad.
Yeah, looking at a shortage of steel continuing, as well as the shortage of rubber and other things. All of these things that, society needs. I just hope we don't come to find out that the reason for the rubber shortage is that it all got used on masks and rubber gloves.
Some of it did.
A fair portion of it did. If you look out into the streets and see all the littered masks everywhere.
So disgusting. Executives from farm machinery maker AGCO Corporation visited their suppliers this summer and found that some of the companies that supply them with parts to make their farm machines were only at 60% staffing levels.
Was this because of government regulations or just because of staffing problems in general?
Probably the same issues that are plaguing every other business out there trying to And this is within the United States, I presume. Tuman and said staffing levels are dropping at some suppliers in the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Texas. And these are the so-called red states, the open, quote-unquote, open states.
60% of their staff.
As workers object to President Biden's vaccine mandate and drop out of the workforce for fear of getting COVID-19 or to move on to other jobs. He says it's the perfect storm of Tylenol moments. It's one headache after another. The supply squeeze has put particular pressure on equipment dealerships who typically see their service business boom during the traditional September through November harvest season. This year, some have resorted to sifting through decade-old inventory for solutions. One pain point for dealerships is an industry-wide shortage of GPS receivers, which are used to run tractor guidance and data systems. At AgPro, because a lot of farming has been automated, right? At AgPro, the largest privately owned Deere & Company dealership in North America, staff in Ohio have been digging out GPS units that date back to 2004. Until now...
That's an old GPS unit.
Those were worthless until now. Now, all of a sudden, it's all they've got. But producers can still use them to record a digital harvest map of their farms, something that many need when talking to bankers, landlords, and crop insurance agents. Equipment manufacturers are faced with a painful choice this harvest season. Send parts to factories to build new tractors and combines to sell to farmers, or redirect those parts into the field to repair broken equipment for existing customers. What do? Well, according to one manufacturer...
They're going to do the one that's going to make them the most money.
Well, according to them, they're going to do the latter. Quote, you can't afford not to support those customers in the field. When you're harvesting, timing is everything. And those guys are going to get mad if the only answer from their supplier is, well, we don't have those parts. You're going to have to buy a whole new tractor.
Oh, that's true.
CNH estimates that supply chain constraints ranging from increases in freight to higher raw materials have cost the company $1 billion. That lag has forced the company to turn some factory parking lots into storage lots. At their combine plant in Grand Island, Nebraska, hundreds of unfinished combines sit outside waiting for parts.
That's certainly not going to cause any problems during the next harvest season. I suspect we won't see the real consequences of this year. Yeah. But next year, I expect food is going to be pretty hard to get.
This sounds really bad.
It does. 603-283-6160. Stock up on canned goods while they exist.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of
where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
Your amp will directly change more lives by getting Free Talk Live in front of people looking for talk radio online and on the air. When you amp Free Talk Live, you get perks like access to the AMP-only Facebook group and AMP podcast. Visit amp.freetalklive.com. Some of you asked, and now we've delivered. LRN.FM's live Keene, New Hampshire studio shows are now streamed in HD on Twitch. Visit our channel at twitch.lrn.fm and give it a follow. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free subscription on Twitch. If you use it on our channel, Twitch will give LRN.FM a monthly piece of your Prime subscription cost. So please watch, follow, share, and subscribe to twitch.lrn.fm. That's twitch.lrn.fm. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Arya and Ian here tonight, and you know, it's interesting to see just how quickly a global economy can just fracture and break on so many different levels, so consistently, and largely entirely because of the government.
Pretty much.
Workers left their jobs at a record pace in August. And
Wait, I thought there was all kinds of job growth. I thought the country's bouncing back.
But a lot more people quit than got hired, apparently.
Interesting.
With bar and restaurant employees.
This was in August, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Bar and restaurant employees, as well as retail staff, just quitting in droves, the Labor Department reported Tuesday.
Well, from what we've heard from people in those industries, in the hospitality business, dealing with the customers is worse than it's ever been.
It is. They have no patience. They have no understanding. But you can say whatever you want to them and get away with it because your employer
you won't get fired.
You won't get fired. I've tried to get fired.
Really?
Yes. I spent about 2 weeks. I was like, I don't want to quit because I don't want to do that to all of my coworkers, but I don't want to work here anymore. So I'm just going to let the Karens have it from now on. One person, I ended up getting a $10 tip from them after telling them, look, every time you call and I have to answer the phone to update you about what's going on, it's taking me longer to do what I'm trying to do, so it's going to take you longer to get your food.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. And then he called back again. I was like, this is stupid, dude. I don't have time for this. And I hung up. And when they came in, $10 tip.
Wow.
Yeah.
They just needed to be put in their place.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work as a method of getting fired, but maybe it does work as a method of putting people in their places. I don't know, but it sucks in these places, and it's largely and the demand for these places. It's so much higher than it has ever been.
Really? Okay, so even though your staff so it's not a result of your staff being down and it feels like a higher demand. You know for a fact orders are up.
Yeah, the hard numbers show orders are way up.
Wow.
And I'm not surprised by people quitting. I want to, and I'm so close to that breaking point. Just haven't done it yet. Quitting has hit a new series high going back to December of 2000.
Well, hold on. Just because I want to clarify. If you quit, you don't get unemployment, right?
I think so.
I've never filed for it, so I have no idea.
I've never filed for unemployment either.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think you probably don't get it.
Yeah, I think you have to get fired for it. Or laid off. One or the other.
Yeah. 4.3 million people left their jobs.
In America?
Yes.
Okay.
The quits rate rose to 2.9%, an increase There's some boring numbers here that aren't really important. Quits have been seen historically as a level of confidence from workers who feel they are secure in finding employment elsewhere. Although labor,
and that's easier than ever.
It is.
If you're in a sucky job, because a lot of people, when the job market's tight and there aren't a lot of jobs available, then you can kind of, if you're stuck in a crappy job, I can understand why somebody who's like living paycheck to paycheck would say, well, it really sucks working here for blah blah corporation, but I don't really have any other options, and I can't just float myself for a few weeks while I try to figure something out. But now it's like anywhere you go, they're begging you to come work for them.
Yeah, like the McDonald's here in Keene, short-staffed. I don't know what they pay now, but it was like $14 an hour or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Versus now where you can start at the Target for $16 an hour.
Yep.
So it's a no-brainer. Try a different job. Find the one that sucks the least at this point and stick with that. The rate, which is measured against total employment, is the highest in a data series that goes back to December of 2000. So more people quit in August of this year than have ever quit in a single month since December of 2000.
Wow. Okay.
Quits have been, got that. A total of 892,000 workers in the food service and accommodation industries left their jobs, with 721,000 retail workers.
So almost 1 million food service people quit?
Yes.
Wow.
And 534,000 in healthcare and social assistance.
And now they're firing even more.
Yes.
Who won't get the vaccine.
This is not going to end well in so many different ways, man. 500,000 healthcare workers quit in the month of August, and now they're firing others for not getting the vaccine. As job openings and hires fell in August, the quits rate hit a new series high, surging along with the rise in COVID cases. I don't know what rise they're talking about, and likely growing concerns about working in the continuing pandemic. No, it's just because the places of employment suck, and they want to find one that sucks a little bit less. Job openings also declined sharply in August as hiring fell. Employee vacancies fell to 10.44 million during the month, a drop of 659,000 versus, the 4.3 million
that quit their
quit.
Jobs.
That's a lot of, So they managed to hire
10 million openings.
Yes.
10 million jobs are available out there.
Well, there's 4.3 million more now than there were.
Wow.
The total fell well short of market expectations for 10.96 million openings, according to FactSet. There's enormous labor shortage in the country right now, and it is not just because people are quitting or have childcare problems or can't get to work due to the Delta variant. The economy is strong as a bull. That is why there is a tremendous demand for labor. He doesn't.
Something just doesn't add up here, does it?
It doesn't, and he doesn't say what is causing the labor shortage. He just says it's not people quitting, and it's not people with childcare problems, and it's not the Delta variant. But we suddenly have this enormous demand for labor, and no one filling it.
I mean, maybe Inkblot's right, and it's an immigration issue.
That much, though? Could be.
There are like temporary workers, right? There are people who they come to the United States for some number of months in the year, and they're granted a certain period of time to work, and then they have to go back, and they do. And so I presume a lot of those folks haven't been coming.
The job posting rate fell to 6.6% in August. I don't know what the job posting rate even means, but that level was just 4.4% a year ago as the economy was still struggling to escape the COVID downturn. No, the government-caused downturn.
Yep.
Even government hiring is down to 1.4% from 2.2%.
Well, I guess that's good news.
Yeah. The JOLTS data runs a month from behind the non-farm payrolls report, but still carries weight at the Fed. And it gets into some boring stuff here that isn't really important. But yeah, that's it. 4.3 million people quit their jobs in the month of August.
And only like 600,000 got a job, I think, was it around that number?
Yes. 500 and something thousand, 659,000.
Well, if they quit their jobs and you can't get unemployment if you quit, well, then how the hell, what are they doing?
They're job surfing, from what I can tell and from what I've read. They're working at a job for a few days, filling it out, seeing whether or not they like it, and then they no-call, no-show because they've gotten a different job elsewhere. Because everyone's so short-staffed, it only takes like 2 or 3 days to go through the process and get hired somewhere now. So employers are probably going to drag that out a bit, I would imagine, is going to be their solution to this in order to keep you longer and not provide you with a job opening to take away someone else's employee. But they're just going to drag the process out to 3 weeks. That way you have to work somewhere else for 3 weeks.
Yeah, but it still doesn't add up, because like if 5 million people quit?
4.3 million.
4.3 million quit and less than 1 million got jobs, then you're still talking about, over 3 million people who aren't surfing. They're just sitting at home.
Yeah, it says
right?
Employment vacancies, which means job openings, fell to 10.44 million during the month, which is a drop of 659,000, which, I don't know of any way of interpreting other than they hired 659,000 people.
Maybe you have to wait until September to find out, what happened or whatever.
That's true, but it sounds like a lot more people quit than were hired during the month of August. I think it's the month we're talking about. 4.3 million, record number of people quitting. And of course, we don't know why these people are quitting. Is anyone polling? Is there a major news agency out there polling people? Hey, why
aren't you working?
Yeah. What are you doing for a living?
Do you have a job?
I suspect a lot of people would say yes, even if they don't. Because, it's kind of embarrassing to be like, I'm living at home with my mom and dad and I don't have a job.
Inkblot points out, who do you think works in the back of restaurant kitchens, food manufacturing, harvest season? Doesn't take much to completely F up the labor pool. And that's true. There's no doubt immigrants take jobs that Americans don't want.
Yep.
And
they want those jobs because they can work them.
And if Americans are sitting at home collecting welfare, and if it's still to the point, even without the bonuses, and this is ultimately the question, is like, how good is the welfare without the extras?
It can't be that good. Wasn't unemployment like 75% of your base pay or something like that?
I don't know. Well, you and I are just speculating on unemployment. We don't know what it's like. But if you're living at home with your parents and you're getting, some sort of check from the government, that's going to be enough, right? Like, you don't have to pay the rent.
Yeah. We're out of time for tonight, but you can chat with us in the meantime over on our chat server, the official chat server. You can find that at chat.freetalklive.com. I don't know what's going to happen, but man, it's not looking good out there.
We'll be talking about it.
It's Free Talk Live.
Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative.